This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Weldon, California, a small town where cattle outnumber the people, nestled in the Kern Valley Mountains. An hour east of Bakersfield, it feels like a world away, the way most people here like it. But what can feel like a cozy, private community by day can quickly feel like miles of lonely roads with nothing but black sky.
I remember it being extremely dark. There's no street lights out there. I don't think the moon must have been very bright that night.
It was January 3rd, 2006. Dana Dostal left her job at a bank in Lake Isabella and made her usual commute back to the Weldon home she shared with her longtime boyfriend, Dale Hay. As she traveled down the long stretch of Kelso Creek Road, she soon realized this drive was anything but ordinary.
When I came on a curve, there was the truck it seemed to be stopped. It was slow moving, but it kind of seemed to be stopped. And so I came up on it, still wasn't moving much, so I passed the vehicle and started to go around some of the curves and then noticed the bright lights in my rear view mirror.
Dana didn't recognize the truck and due to the darkness had a hard time making out the figure behind the steering wheel.
So I just remember the blaring bright lights, behind me. And I got to a part in the road where I was just like, this guy has to go around me. I couldn't see. So I slowed down real slow. And the truck went around me and kind of like slammed on his brakes in front of me. It seemed kind of like a cat and mouse. If I sped up a little bit, he was right on my tail, and I slowed down and he didn't pass. He just stayed, behind me.
After frantically trying to lose the car, Dana eventually thought she was safe, so she went home.
I remember seeing the lights kind of facing our house when I passed through the gate. Dale had sent Willie out to open the gate for me.
The other car left as soon as it seen me.
Dale's son was just 9 years old at the time.
She told him that there was a car that followed her home from work.
Despite the scare, Dana and Willie both recall that fairly quickly the situation seemed to fizzle out.
You're in the house, you think everything is calm. I changed my clothes, I go to do a load of laundry, he's still cooking dinner.
I was playing with my Christmas toys. And then the car came by again and it stopped. Then my dad went out there and it took off again.
When he came back in, he said he had seen the lights flashing in our front window, like the guy was taunting the house. He was flashing the lights, not just blaring them in.
10 minutes after the truck returned and sped away, headlights once again appeared through the family's windows.
I'm putting laundry away, I come out, and he's gone. The front door wasn't open this time, he was gone. Willie said he got in the Jeep and left.
I thought he was gonna be fine.
At this point, both Dana and Willie say they weren't worried yet. They didn't think there'd be an actual confrontation.
We were watching Thelma and Louise, Willie and I, and just too much of the movie had gone by.
We waited about 30 minutes. Me and Dana, we got in our car and went to check it out, and we found him crashed into a fence.
He was already dead. I mean, I knew it, but you just think, oh, help is on its way.
It wasn't a car wreck that killed the 34-year-old father. He'd barely made it a mile from his home before someone put a bullet through his skull.
I really don't remember how I felt, what I was feeling. I was just numb all the time.
The natural assumption was Dale was murdered by the mystery man who began following Dana midway during her short drive home from work.
What else could it be?
Dana and William said Dale gave no indication whatsoever that he knew who or why anyone would seemingly try to torment his family.
It was very confusing because the police would say it was just a lucky shot. And then in the next breath saying it had to be somebody who knew what they were doing because there was no nick on the Jeep.
This area where Dale Hay was murdered is desolate, even more so then than it is today. It seems highly unlikely that anyone would end up in this part of Kern County for no reason. If the killer didn't live here themselves, they were likely here for another reason that someone in this area knows about.
Everybody knows everybody. You can't rob a bank there because you've only got an in and an out, and you're going to get caught. There's no escaping the valley because you're surrounded by mountains. So who would want to commit a crime here?
Despite the town's isolation and small population, Dana says the case seemed to go cold fast.
They investigated, like I said, the most logical leads of affairs, drugs, guns, things that are typically associated with murders. But when nothing showed up, they just quit looking.
No sheriff, detective has ever spoken to me until I reached out to them. I didn't really think that I would have to be the one to kind of go out there and do things to get people to look into it.
13 years later, Dale's daughter has taken it upon herself to contact the sheriff's department and fight for answers.
And I just asked them what they knew or what was going on, and they just told me currently the case wasn't being looked at and there hasn't been any information since 2006.
As adults, Kelly and her siblings have so many questions.
In my heart, in my gut, I don't feel like it was random, but I have no proof, and obviously the police don't have any evidence to prove otherwise either.
I think for a long time I felt guilty because I survived and he didn't. Maybe I was the target. I'm the one that pissed that guy off. Taking that one person's life has taken life from so many.
We just live day by day, and I think about him every day and have him close to my heart.
With the Sheriff's Department's current staffing issues and high volume of new crimes, it seems unlikely that Dale's murder has a real chance at being solved unless someone comes forward with information. The truck that followed Dana home that night is described as boxy, possibly an older Chevy or Ford model. It's also believed that the truck had a camper shell that was lighter in color than the body of the truck. If you have any information on this case whatsoever, you're urged to call the Sheriff's Department at 661-861-3110, or you can remain anonymous by calling the Secret Witness Hotline at 661-322-4040. In Weldon, I'm Olivia LaVoice, 17 News.
Welcome to episode 16 of True Crime XS. This week we're taking a look at 2006, knowing that the killer got a boat early in the year 2005. We're not entirely sure what he did with that boat, but he describes having victims on it in Washington, and it's probably someone from the list that we went through for 2005. But we did want to look at a couple of weird things that the killer had done. One of those was in the competency evaluation to see if he understood his rights. His answer seems to contradict the idea that he was ever going to tell the FBI anything. That, coupled with the Baphomet and 11 skulls, made Meg and I realize we needed to look really carefully at everything.
From an assessment by Dr. Ronald Roche for Forensic Assessment Services, dated April 29th in 2012. I evaluated the defendant on April 27, 2012. The purpose of the evaluation was to assess his capacity to waive his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination and his Sixth Amendment right to assistance of counsel. From the section Appreciation of Range and Nature of Possible Penalties. This item calls for an assessment of the defendant's concrete understanding and appreciation of the conditions and the duration of possible restrictions that could be imposed. A simplistic understanding suffices. Of concern here is that the defendant have at least a gross understanding of what is at risk and a motivation to protect him or herself consistent with the risk. Question: will you plead guilty or not guilty at your trial? Why? Answer: guilty. I gave them the cases. Pleading not guilty would be a charade considering the evidence I gave them when I agreed to give a confession. I already talked to them, but stopped when my lawyer on my current case raised an issue. The lawyer made a point it would affect sentencing and the outcome of the current case. It would show a history of things done as opposed to an isolated incident.
Suburban Seattle man on trial for the murder of his wife. More than 7 years after her death, the victim's family is hoping they will finally get justice. ABC's Neil Karlinski has that story.
In a Seattle courtroom Monday, a mother unflinchingly took on her daughter's alleged murderer, the same man she once called family, but has pursued for years as a cold-blooded killer.
I just said, he murdered my daughter. I have cried my brains out every day for 7 years. If he can't take being confronted by a 72-year-old woman, well, I'm sorry, but he's not much of a man if he can't handle that.
Nicole Peets vanished from home in 2006. At the time, her husband, David Peets, seen here in the couple's happy wedding video, was among those talking to reporters.
Try and focus on what we can do to be finding her so that we, so you don't let your mind go to the bad places.
Her body was later found in a wooded area, strangled. Police were interested in David as a suspect early on. They say he was unhappy with his marriage, frustrated with his job, and having affairs. But it would be 6 long years before they would arrest him, claiming to have built a case on circumstantial evidence and DNA. Defense attorneys call the case flimsy, without a single eyewitness to a crime.
It's not based on any direct evidence, and it's not going to show that David Peets took Nicole's life.
Prosecutors say the case will take time to prove, just as they say David was methodical in covering up the crime. Nicole's mother testified about her daughter's funeral and something she says David told her.
He put his arms around me and said, I didn't think you'd take it so hard.
David Peets celebrated his 36th birthday in court Monday. He has pleaded not guilty. For Good Morning America, Neil Karlinski, ABC News, Seattle.
We're going to bring in ABC's chief legal affairs anchor, Dan Abrams, right now and explain why it took so long to bring this to trial.
Well, obviously, they didn't think they had enough evidence up till recently. And I think that 2 things have happened with regard to new technology. A, with regard to cell phones, and B, with regard to DNA. So they've now been able to better pinpoint where a crucial phone call was made that the authorities say is incriminating. And B, with regard to DNA evidence, they say they were able to link him to her car in a way that they might not have been able to do previously. So some new technology has helped them confirm what were their suspicions, because they've been suspicious of him since very early on in the investigation.
So what you said helps, but the length of time, does that affect the case, though, in any kind of way?
Yeah, it's not helpful. You don't want to wait 6 or 7 years. Memories start to fade. People switch jobs. Evidence is lost. But there have been a lot of cases where it does take some time. This is not an easy case.
How strong do you think this case is?
Look, they believe that you've got to put the puzzle together to convict here. It's not a single piece of evidence. But I'll tell you, of all the pieces of evidence, the one that struck me the most was the one that when her body was found, she was still wearing a dental retainer. Why is that so important? Because remember, his account is that he sees her asleep at midnight, and that's the last time he sees her. Theoretically, someone abducted her with the dental retainer, and I think it's a very crucial piece of evidence for prosecutors to say it wasn't a stranger, it was him.
And we'll see what happens coming up. All right, Dan, thanks very much.
So here are the missing persons cases from the killer's comparison searches on his computer. And also, just a quick note, I tried to hunt down the cases of Raymond Rodriguez and Rolando Valdez for this show, and I couldn't find a single piece of information on them anywhere. Just a simple report indicating that somewhere in the United States, in 2006, they went missing.
Rochelle Marie Smith was last seen by her aunt and legal guardian, Stephanie Smith, at 10:30 p.m. on May 16, 2006. Rochelle was asleep on the couch at the time. When Stephanie woke up the next morning, the child was gone. Her roommate, Lee Cowan, stated his mother had picked up Rochelle and would be keeping her for a few days. Cowan was very close to Rochelle and claimed to be her father, although he wasn't related to her at all. Stephanie believed his story, but she became concerned as days passed with no word from either Rochelle or Cowan's mother. On May 22nd, Cowan apparently stole Stephanie's teal 1995 Ford van with North Dakota license plates numbered HAY 548 and disappeared. Stephanie reported her niece as a missing child at the time, and Cowan became the prime suspect in her disappearance. It was thought that he may have taken Rochelle to Kansas, where his family lives, but this theory was disproved when the stolen van was located in the Upper Soares National Wildlife Refuge on May 23rd. Cowan's body was inside. He had committed suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. An extensive search of the area turned up no sign of Rochelle. Investigators are uncertain what happened to Rochelle, but they do not believe that she is still alive. Cowan is the only suspect in her disappearance. She is missing under suspicious circumstances. Rochelle Smith was 3 years old, 3 feet 4 inches tall, and 40 pounds. She has light brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
Lori Ann Boffman was last seen driving away from her residence on Holly Drive in Girard, Ohio at 6:30 p.m. on August 5th, 2006. She left her purse, medication, and identification at home. She was driving so erratically that the friend who was with her asked to be let out and dropped him off, and she continued on alone. Her loved one stated that she seemed to be in a bad mood and was exhibiting unstable behavior. On 5:30 a.m. the next day, Boffman's blue 1992 Mercury Sable was found on the lawn in front of a library near High Street on the east side of Youngstown, Ohio. It had been involved in a minor traffic collision. The keys were in the ignition, the engine was running, and the front door was open, but there was no sign of Boffman at the scene. She left her eyeglasses and some papers in her vehicle and has never been heard from again. Boffman left behind 3 children, and it's uncharacteristic of her to abandon them. She won $1,000 in the lottery the day before her disappearance and had ordered $500 worth of food for a party, but she never came back to pay for the food or pick it up. Dallas, Texas officials are investigating Boffman's disappearance. She has relatives living in that city and may try to get in touch with them. Lori Boffman was 45 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighed 180 pounds. She has black hair and brown eyes. At the time of her disappearance, her hair was styled in dreadlocks. Her case remains unsolved. Trenton John Duckett was last seen on August 27, 2006, at Windmere Apartments in the 1400 block of Griffin Road in Leesburg, Florida. He was living there with his mother, Melinda Duckett, at the time. Melinda stated she put her son to bed at approximately 7 o'clock p.m. When she went into his room to check on him 2 hours later, he was missing. The bedroom window's screen had been slit, leading authorities to speculate that an abductor had gained access to the room through the window and carried the child away. Authorities initially announced they believed Trenton had been abducted and made an appeal to the public to search for him. Several days after his disappearance, however, investigators stated they had no reason to believe that the child was deceased or had been taken out of the local area, and that his parents were the focal point of the investigation. Melinda and Trenton's father, Joshua Duckett, had begun dating in high school and got married in 2005. They were in the process of a heated divorce and a custody battle in August of 2006. Their relationship had been a contentious one, with numerous allegations of domestic violence between the couple and abuse of Trenton before and after the marriage. Trenton was often in the care of Melinda's grandparents or in foster homes. Melinda won a temporary restraining order against Joshua in July 2006 after accusing him of threatening her life and Trenton's. Joshua denies the allegations. He has been cooperative in the disappearance of his son, and he passed a polygraph test. Joshua's father, James Jimmy Duckett, is on death row in Florida. A former police officer, he was convicted of the rape and murder of a young girl in 1988. Joshua was only a toddler at the time his father was incarcerated, but they have maintained a relationship with each other. Trenton had visited James on death row, and Melinda kept up a written correspondence with him. Authorities investigated to see whether Trenton's disappearance was related to his grandfather's crimes, but found no evidence to support this theory. About a week after Trenton went missing, police stated they were not certain he had disappeared. At the time Melinda said he did. No one other than Melinda reported having seen Trenton since his mother picked him up from daycare
a full day prior to his reported disappearance, and witnesses reported seeing Melinda alone in the hours prior to her son's going missing. Melinda refused to take a polygraph, and she failed a voice stress analysis test. Investigators found photographs and sonogram images of Trenton and some of his toys in the trash bin when they searched Melinda's apartment after the child's disappearance was reported. It's unclear why someone tried to throw those items away, but their presence in the garbage made police suspicious. Melinda told her attorney she took her son and a shotgun to a shooting range at the Ocala National Forest on August 27th and became lost, and drove around Central Florida for 8 hours. Police are anxious to talk to anyone who may have seen Melinda's vehicle, a silver 2006 Mitsubishi Eclipse, on August 27th, so they can verify Melinda's story. Witnesses reported seeing her in Leesburg at the time that she was supposedly lost. On September 8th, 13 days after her son vanished, Melinda was found shot to death in a closet in her paternal grandparents' home in Lady Lake, Florida. She had taken her own life at the age of 21. She left 2 notes, neither of which disclosed any information as to what happened to Trenton. Melinda's family cited the stress of her son's disappearance and the subsequent media scrutiny as a reason for her suicide. She had a history of depression and 2 previous stays in mental hospitals, most recently in 2005, after she either harmed herself or threatened to. Melinda's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Nancy Grace, a television talk show host, and CNN, her network, in December of 2006. Grace had conducted an aggressive interview with Melinda shortly before her death, and her parents argued that she had been pushed over the edge as a result. Melinda committed suicide before the interview had aired. In November 2010, the lawsuit was settled out of court. CNN agreed to set up a $200,000 trust fund to finance the search for Trenton. On September 21st, nearly a month after Trenton went missing and 2 weeks after Melinda's death, police officially named her as the prime and only suspect in Trenton's case. They stated they did not necessarily believe she had harmed him, however. Authorities investigated the possibility that Trenton had been sent to his mother's native South Korea. Melinda had been adopted by a New York couple shortly after birth and never knew her biological parents, but she said she'd like to locate her Korean relatives and get Trenton in touch with his roots. Police found no evidence that the child had ever left the United States, however. Almost a full year after Trenton disappeared, investigators stated they ruled out several theories in his case. They no longer believe he was abducted by a stranger or that his mother gave him to another individual to hide from Joshua. Authorities remain hopeful that Trenton is alive and continue to actively investigate his disappearance. Trenton Duckett was 2 years old, 3 feet tall, and weighed 35 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes. His case remains unsolved. Brian Dos Santos Gomez was abducted from Fort Myers, Florida on December 1st, 2006. He and his mother, Maria Ramos Dos Santos, were waiting with Maria's friend, Janice Duarte, at a bus stop when a woman drove up and asked for directions. She said she had been driving around for 8 hours, trying to find her mother's house. Maria, Brian, and Duarte got on the bus, but the woman followed the bus until they got off and asked again for help. Maria, Brian, and Duarte got into her car. Shortly afterwards, she demanded $500 and made threats to Maria. She said she was going to Tampa, Florida, but not to tell the police this, or she would harm the women's families. She added that if the police stopped the car, the women had to claim they already knew each other. The abductor eventually dropped Maria and her friend off at the roadside near the Villaggio housing development off Three Oaks Parkway in Estero, Florida. She told them they had to wait 10 minutes before calling anyone, and then she drove away with Brian. Neither Brian nor his abductor have ever been heard from again. The abductor is described as Hispanic, between 28 and 30 years old, heavyset, and approximately 5 foot 4 inches tall, with straight black hair, which was partially pinned up in a bun. She wore blue jeans and a black blouse, or a t-shirt, and spoke Spanish. She is believed to have been driving a black 2-door 1998 to 2003 Ford Explorer SUV with older, peeling window tint. Maria stated there was a diaper bag and car seat in the SUV, indicating the abduction had been planned. The abductor should be considered to be armed and dangerous. Brian's mother and his father are from a village in Minas Gerais, Brazil, and paid human traffickers helped them move to the United States. Authorities theorized that Brian was abducted in retaliation after Maria and Jurandir fell behind in the payments they owed to the smugglers. An enforcer for a smuggling ring and an acquaintance of Maria's was detained in connection with Brian's abduction, but police could find no evidence to link him to the baby, and he was deported to his native Brazil without being charged with anything. Brian's parents admitted to their illegal status and to owing hundreds of dollars to the smugglers, but denied that this could be the reason
the child was taken. Investigators now believe Brian's kidnapping was a random crime. After his abduction, a Fort Myers woman went to the police and said she had been walking on the sidewalk with her infant grandchild when she was approached by a woman in a black SUV who asked for directions. This was in the same general vicinity as where Brian was taken and occurred only hours after his abduction. The grandmother and Brian's mother both picked the same person out of a photo lineup. The woman they identified was later cleared of suspicion, but investigators stated the two incidents were too similar to ignore, and they believe Brian's abductor had also accosted the other baby's grandmother. The abductor may be a woman who wanted a baby of her own. Possibly, she had experienced a miscarriage or stillbirth before she took Brian. Brian's kidnapper has never been identified. Authorities believe she may be from South America or Mexico originally, or possibly a second-generation immigrant, and that English may be her first language, although she spoke Spanish during the abduction. Brian Santos was 3 weeks old, 2 feet long, and weighed 12 pounds. He had black hair and brown eyes. Brian's disappearance remains unsolved. Carla Bicentini was last seen at approximately 2:00 a.m. on February 9, 2006, at the Adega Bar and Grill in the vicinity of the 100 block of Ferry Street in the Ironbound neighborhood of Newark, New Jersey. She had gone there to visit a friend who worked at the restaurant. Carla left the establishment with a man who was described as Caucasian, in his 30s, 5 feet 8 and 200 pounds, with blue eyes, short salt and pepper hair, and an unshaven beard. He was wearing a black t-shirt. Her companion has not been identified, but his first name may have been Antonio. He and Carla were drinking and talking with each other before they left together. It is unclear how they could communicate, as Carla speaks little English, and the man did not appear to speak Portuguese, her native language. The man was reportedly quiet and sullen. When Carla left with the man, she told her friend she was going to the man's car to look at a photo and to talk. She may have been intoxicated at the time. It is believed that she returned to her residence on Ferry Street near the restaurant after she was last seen, as her wallet, passport, and jacket were found there. She has never been heard from again. The man she was last seen with is considered a person of interest in her disappearance. Several days after Carla went missing, someone called her boss's cellular phone and screamed for help. The caller has never been identified, and it's unclear whether the call might have been related to her case. Carla was born and raised in a small agricultural town in Brazil. She came to the United States less than a month prior to her disappearance. She was planning to stay a few months as part of a cultural exchange program. She had saved her money to go to the U.S. and was very happy about the opportunity. Carla was initially assigned to work at a White Castle restaurant and live in a small motel room with several other women in the program, but she became unhappy with the arrangement, moved out, and changed jobs. She was an engineering student at the time she went missing, living with a fellow exchange student, and had just started a job at the Mediterranean Manor. Carla's disappearance has been well covered in the media in Brazil and in Portuguese-language newspapers in New Jersey, but the mainstream American press gave it little attention. Authorities believe she disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Her mother believes she was murdered, since she never went more than a couple of days without getting in touch with her family. Carla Bicentini was 22 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed around 135 pounds. She has blonde hair and brown eyes. She has multiple piercings and the following tattoos: a red and yellow chameleon on her hip, a tribal design on her lower back, and a dark gray angel with opened wings on her back. Her native language is Portuguese, and she speaks very little English. Her case remains unsolved.
So there's really only a couple of cases on the comparison searches, and then there's all this other stuff going on in 2006.
Russell Matthew Gonzalez was last heard from in the Eugene, Oregon area on January 9, 2006. His vehicle, described as a blue 1986 VW Quantum, was located in July 2006 on Forest Service Road, south of Eugene, Oregon. He was en route to the Coos Bay or North Bend area. Russell Gonzalez was 41 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed 170 pounds. He had brown hair and brown eyes. He had a dragon tattoo on his right forearm and an unidentified tattoo on his left forearm. His case remains unsolved. Russell Sterling Wilson was last seen in San Diego, California on January 13, 2006. He walked away from his wife while at a laundromat, and he never returned. An extensive search turned up no sign of him, and few details are available on his case. Russell Wilson was 61 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 180 pounds. He had white hair and green eyes. He was balding with a mustache and has a tattoo on his left arm. His case remains unsolved. Jennifer Joyce Kessie was last contacted by a cellular phone at approximately 10:00 p.m. on January 24, 2006. She was at her residence at Mosaic Apartments in the vicinity of the 3700 block of Conroy Road in Orlando, Florida at the time.
She has never been heard from again. It is believed Kessie got up and left for work at approximately 8 o'clock a.m. the next morning, but she never arrived there. She was employed as a financial analyst in Ocoee, Florida at the time of her disappearance. Her coworkers notified her family after she did not show up for work, and her parents let themselves into her apartment. Nothing appeared to be out of place there, but Kessie was missing, as were her purse, her cellular phone, and her black four-door 2004 Chevrolet Malibu with a Florida license plate H90KYC. 3 days after Kessie's disappearance, her car was found in the parking lot of the Huntington on the Green apartment complex, less than a mile from her residence. Residents at the complex stated the car had been parked in the lot for several days. Bloodhound tracked Kessie's scent from her vehicle back to her own residence. There were no signs that a struggle had taken place in or around the car, and its valuable DVD player had not been stolen. Authorities announced that they were looking for a person of interest in Kessie's disappearance after reviewing surveillance tapes in the area where her car was found. An unidentified person, approximately 5'3" to 5 feet 5 inches tall, were seen parking Kessie's car, getting out, and walking away. Investigators have been unable to tell whether the individual is male or female. This individual is the prime suspect in Kessie's disappearance. He or she may be wearing clothes similar to what a painter or manual worker would wear. Prior to her disappearance, Kessie had expressed concern that her apartment complex might be unsafe. She had been living on her own for only a few months prior to her disappearance, and there were few other residents in the complex, which was under construction. Kessie stated she was frightened of some of the construction workers. However, it has not been proven that any of them were involved in her disappearance. She had a good relationship with her boyfriend and vacationed with him in the Virgin Islands the month she went missing. He is not considered to be a suspect in her case, as he has an alibi. It is extremely uncharacteristic of Kessie to miss work, be out of touch with her family, or to leave her cellular phone turned off. It has been turned off since her disappearance. There has not been any activity on her credit cards or her e-pass. Kessie is a 2003 graduate of the University of Central Florida. Her degree was in finance. She was a member of the Alpha Delta Pi sorority while she was a student. Jennifer Kessie was 24 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighed 125 pounds. She has blonde hair and green eyes. She has a quarter-sized tattoo of a shamrock on the left side of her buttock. She wears contact lenses and her eyebrows are darker colored. Depending on her clothing, her eyes may appear to be blue. Her case remains unsolved. Donald David Smetlak last had contact with his family at approximately 4 o'clock p.m. on January 28, 2006, by telephone from his residence off Logan Road in North Versailles, Pennsylvania. He said he was going to visit a friend in Delmont, Pennsylvania, but he never arrived. He was scheduled to eat dinner with his parents the next day, but he never made it there either. He's never been heard from again. Shortly before noon on February 9, 2006, his vehicle, a silver four-door 2004 Mazda 3, was found abandoned in Oakland, Pennsylvania. This was about 30 miles from his residence. The windows were rolled down, and snow had gotten inside. It had snowed on February the 2nd and February the 3rd, but not since then. The car was presumed to have been parked at that location since around that time. His loved ones stated he did not have any known friends in the Oakland area, and they did not believe he would have deliberately left his car with the windows rolled down. When his apartment was checked, it was clean. There were no indications of a struggle or foul play. Donald graduated from Norwin High School and the University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg. His degree is in criminal justice. During his college years, he was a commuter student. After graduation in 2005, he got an apartment and took a job in the produce section of the Giant Eagle store. But shortly before his disappearance, he lost his job. He was looking for another one and had an interview scheduled in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. By January of 2006, he had been living on his own for 9 months and had been seeing the same woman for 2 years. Months before he disappeared, Donald went out for a meal with his parents and told his mother, "If anything ever happened to me, or if I was ever missing, just know that I'll be okay." His mother was not alarmed by this statement and thought it might be connected to problems he could be having with his girlfriend. Investigators think that Donald had been selling drugs in Westmoreland County for over 5 years by the time of his disappearance. He hadn't been arrested during this time period, but police are basing their conclusion on what other witnesses said and by what they found at his apartment. Authorities believe his disappearance is connected to the drug trade. Donald has not used his cellular phone or accessed his bank accounts since his disappearance. He was close to his parents and spoke to them every few days. His family says it's uncharacteristic of him to leave without warning. Donald Smetlak was 25 years old, 6 feet tall, and 220 pounds. He has brown hair and hazel eyes. His nickname is Donnie. He has a Chinese symbol tattooed in the center of his back and on his right shin in black ink. He has a tattoo of his name in Chinese on the center of his chest in black ink. He wore a goatee at the time of his disappearance. His case remains unsolved.
Route 16, often called the Highway of Tears, once again at the center of a criminal investigation. The body of 14-year-old Ayla Sarek discovered here late Friday afternoon.
This is the 14-year-old First Nations female girl that's resident of Prince George that's been missing.
A passing motorist found Sarek's remains while traveling east of Prince George. RCMP were called in and an investigation was launched. The teen vanished more than a week ago. She was last spotted near a downtown bar. Her family reported her missing and plastered the area with posters calling for information.
It's tragic. I'm shocked. It's really hard to put words to it.
At least 6 women, mainly Aboriginal, have disappeared over the last decade on this vast stretch of highway. But many believe the actual number of missing women is much higher. One of the most high-profile cases involved 25-year-old tree planter Nicole Orr, who vanished while hitchhiking in 2002. Her disappearance and that of many other women remains unsolved. RCMP have repeatedly said they cannot rule out the possibility that a serial killer could be preying on women along Route 16. But so far, they say they've found no evidence to link the cases. Police also say they will not speculate on whether Sarek's death is linked to any of the missing women files.
But as to make any link, I wouldn't want to speculate on that at all. The investigation is continuing.
Police are releasing few other details about what might have happened to Ayla Sarek. But they do say this is now a homicide investigation. Melanie Nagy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Jade Michelle Chambers was last seen at approximately 3:00 p.m. on February 10, 2006, at her residence on Slaptown Road in Mountain City, Tennessee. She's never been heard from again. Few details are available in her case. Jade Chambers was 22 years old. She was 4 foot 11 inches tall and weighed 90 pounds. She had auburn hair and green eyes. She has a tattoo of a bouquet of roses with the words "Wild Child" on her upper thigh. Her case remains unsolved.
New information tonight is coming out in the Montreux murder case from 2006. News 4's Madison Corney spoke with detectives on the case and family members of the Musalos who were shot and killed nearly 10 years ago in their home. And Madison, what does the public know now that we haven't heard about in the past?
Joe, Washoe County detectives are releasing 2 new pieces of information in this unsolved murder case. Details that investigators believe could shed more light on who may have been involved in Albert and Joan Musalo's deaths.
March 28, 2006. Albert and Joan Musalo were found shot to death in the bedroom of their Montreux home.
This crime does not, scream robbery or burglary. It screams targeted for a reason. What that reason is, we don't know.
The Musalos were in their mid-70s, retired, and reportedly had no known enemies. But over the years, some people have come up with their own theories.
The Musalos were not involved in any nefarious activities. They had no criminal history. There's been rumors floating around that they were in the witness protection program or that they'd been involved with the mafia because they were from New York. Those are totally unsubstantiated. We've vetted them thoroughly through the FBI.
Lieutenant Tom Green with the Washoe County Sheriff's Office has been on the Musalos murder case since the beginning and hasn't been able to release certain aspects of the case until now.
The phone lines were cut to the home, and I think that's an important piece that's going to create some questions with people as far as whether that changes their theories about the case or what they think or who could have been involved.
It may not sound like groundbreaking evidence to you or me, but Lieutenant Green says it's an extremely rare method of operation in a homicide.
Since 1960, we've only had one other case where phone lines were cut, and that case bears no resemblance to this case at all. We think it tells us some things about the offender, that it's quite probable the offender had prior knowledge of the home, possibly even knew the victims, that this wasn't a random act, that they were targeted.
Another new piece of information detectives are sharing with the public is the path they believe was used to access the Montreux neighborhood, considering there is 24-hour security at the front gate. And keep in mind, it had snowed the night of the murders.
After the snow melted, we were able to see footprints in their side yard that led down to the perimeter fence that surrounds Montreux and comes onto the walking path that we're standing on right now.
Pictures taken at the crime scene show where mud had been left behind in the home, along with the most important piece of evidence.
We do have evidence, including DNA evidence from an unknown male offender.
DNA evidence makes this a solid case if detectives can get their hands on the final piece of the puzzle.
We're looking for somebody who knew somebody back in 2006 and that their behavior changed after the murder somehow. And if they could just come forward with that little nugget of information, we can do the rest with the science and either rule them in or out. That's all we need is that little nudge in that direction.
The Musallo's daughter, Joanne, and her husband hope every day for new information.
They were not flashy people in jewelry or anything. Nothing was really taken. So why? Why would you go in and kill 2 old people? Somebody knows something. So please, say something. Come forward.
Now, as the 10-year anniversary of her parents' death approaches, Joanne is increasing the reward for information. She and her family are now offering $50,000 on top of the $5,000 offered by Secret Witness. If you know anything about the Musallo's murders, you can remain anonymous by calling Secret Witness at 322-4900. Joe?
Hopefully they will solve it someday. Thank you, Madison, for that.
There were over 500 missing persons cases and strange homicides that we investigated for 2006, including 6 cases in Oregon and Washington State that were no more than just a name. The FBI says they ruled the killer out and the Musallo murders in March of 2006, but I'm not so sure. I think that some of the DNA found at the scene may belong to the killer or possibly to another of the killer's victims. But it was the Musallo case, with its links to the Courier case with the cut phone line, that led me to a different case that I'll talk about at the end of the show.
Jessica Edith Louise Foster was last contacted by a family member by telephone at a residence in the vicinity of Cornerstone Place in North Las Vegas, Nevada on March 28th of 2006. They never heard from her again. Her live-in boyfriend, Peter Todd, stated she left him on April the 3rd. He stated she left to go to a dentist appointment, and when he returned to her apartment after being out for a while, she wasn't there, and her belongings were missing, with the exception of her makeup and her hairdryer. Foster's loved one stated it would be uncharacteristic of her to leave those items behind. After Foster's disappearance, her family learned she may have been sex trafficked from Canada to Atlantic City to Las Vegas by Donald Vaz, a man she met in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. She thought of him as a friend, and in April of 2005, he invited her on a trip to New Jersey. From there, they traveled to Nevada. It was supposed to be a short trip, and Jessie had 2 jobs waiting for her back in Canada, but she wound up staying in Nevada. Her family didn't realize that she'd been involved in prostitution. She kept putting off her return home and said she'd met a man, Peter Todd, who was moving in with him. Then she said they'd gotten engaged. Foster was arrested for prostitution-related offenses in June and in September of 2005. Todd was her pimp. He'd also beaten her, breaking her jaw and sending her to the hospital the same month as her first arrest. One of the employees at the escort agency that Foster worked at noticed that she regularly had bruises and believed she was being abused. Foster went back to Canada to visit her family in the holidays of 2005, but on Christmas morning, right after everyone had opened their presents, she went back to the airport and caught an afternoon flight back to Las Vegas. This is the last time her family saw her, but she continued to keep in touch with them by telephone. A few months later, just before she went missing, she told her sister she wanted to leave Todd. Todd maintains his innocence in her disappearance. Foster is originally from Canada and grew up in Kamloops, British Columbia, before moving to Calgary to live with her father and finish her last 2 years of high school. After high school, she stayed in Calgary and worked and planned to eventually attend university. Her family still lives there. She kept in daily contact with her relatives in Canada and planned to attend her sister's wedding in April, but they have not heard from her since her disappearance. She has also not used her credit cards, bank account, or cellular phone since March the 28th. She left behind $20,000 in the bank, money she'd gotten from a car accident settlement. Her loved ones fear for her safety. Both American and Canadian police are investigating her disappearance. Jessie Foster was 21 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 120 pounds. She has blonde hair and hazel eyes. Foster's hair may be dyed brown or may have streaks in it. She has multiple piercings. Her case remains unsolved. From the Kitsap Sun, On April 15, 2006, authorities are investigating the discovery of a body in Olympic National Park that may be an Olympic College instructor who disappeared April 1st. Hikers found the body late Wednesday in the Soldock Valley area of the mountainous park, and the case is now under investigation by Clallam County and U.S. National Park officials. Authorities have not confirmed that the body is that of the missing instructor, Wendell Harris, 57, of Polsbo, but Harris's vehicle, a black 1995 Chevy Tahoe, was found at a parking area about a mile away from the body. We can't say definitively that it's him, but in all likelihood, it might be, said Deputy Scott Wilson, spokesman for the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office. The cause and manner of death are still under investigation. Wilson said that Harris was last seen after teaching a class on the OC campus March 31st. When he didn't show up for work on April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, a fellow faculty member called police for help. Neighbors told investigators that Harris had planned to go hiking about the same time he went missing, and deputies had been systematically checking trailheads looking for his vehicle. A temporary faculty member, Harris, was applying for a permanent position at the college, Wilson added.
2006 features one of the cases that Meg has spent the most time on, which really has nothing to do with this killer, but I'm going to mention it because it's a big part of true crime history.
New tonight, inside the investigation of a possible break in one of our area's biggest mysteries. What happened to Brian Schaefer? He was an OSU student who disappeared back in 2006, never to be seen or heard from again.
Now, almost 14 years later, Crime Tracker 10 brought a potential clue to police. Angela Ann explains how the FBI got involved, what they found out, and what happens next.
When it comes to missing persons in Ohio, there is one name that probably resonates more than any other: Brian Schaefer. His case has the makings of a Hollywood movie. A young medical student last seen going up this escalator to a popular campus area bar. But video never showed him leaving. Or did he? Nearly 14 years after Brian disappeared, this photo recently started circulating of a man, supposedly homeless and American, in Tijuana, Mexico. It said, "Help locate." Facebook groups dedicated to finding Brian swore it was him. The theories grew rampant. Brian was alive. So we brought the photo to the attention of Columbus Police and Detective Blanche Tucker.
When you first saw this, what did you think?
I was like, wow, it could be. Could it be? It's a possibility.
Because it does look a little
like him. It does.
It was the first big break for the Brian Schaefer case. Crime Tracker 10 got unprecedented access to the files, showing the endless interviews and the leads police exhausted year after year.
We still get calls and we still receive tips.
Despite those tips and the neighborhood searches, plus pleas for information, answers never came until this photo.
It appeared that it could be Brian Schaefer, but to see if it was him, I contact, the FBI, who assists us in a lot of our cases, to see if they can do a facial recognition.
So the FBI compared the Tijuana man photo with the others they already had in a file of Brian. It took 4 weeks, but finally, Detective Tucker had her answer.
That it wasn't him.
It was not him.
Correct.
Was that a letdown?
It was. My hopes were high that it could be him.
Foul play has never been ruled out, nor has the fact that Brian maybe just took off. The stresses of life, med school, and losing a mother to cancer.
Do you feel that somebody that has been interviewed in the past maybe withheld information?
I do.
You do? Mm-hmm. But you can't say who yet.
Can't say who.
Under CPD's new cold case initiative, Detective Tucker is now reviewing every binder once again. And while this photo is now a dead end, it is at least for her progress in a case that continues to haunt.
It would mean closure. Not just closure for us, but closure for the family and the friends.
For Crime Tracker 10, Angela Ann, 10 TV News.
There is still a reward for any information that could help solve this case. You can leave your tip anonymously with Crime Stoppers of Central Ohio, and there's the number, 614-461-TIPS.
Alicia Marie Scott disappeared from Bisbee, Arizona on April 5, 2006. Authorities believe she may have left the area of her own accord and may be traveling with a baby. There are few details available in her case, but Alicia Scott was 15 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed 130 pounds. She has brown hair and hazel eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Ashley Lee James went missing on April 30th, 2006, from a shelter called the Gemini House in Lakewood, Colorado. Ashley had been at Gemini because no one knows who or where her parents are. She had been living on the streets prior to going to Gemini, and the Gemini House has since closed. Ashley James was 15 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighed 135 pounds. She had brown hair and hazel eyes. Anyone with information regarding this case is asked to contact the Lakewood Police Department. Her case remains unsolved. Patrick Wayne Wright was last seen leaving the Houston Northwest Medical Center in the vicinity of FM 1960 and Cali Drive in Spring, Texas on May 7, 2006. He has never been heard from again, and few details are available in his case. Patrick Wright was 50 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed around 200 pounds. He has brown hair and green eyes. His case remains unsolved. Leah Rochelle Peebles moved from Fort Worth, Texas to Albuquerque, New Mexico on May 5, 2006. She was residing with friends in the vicinity of the 2100 block of Herb Street Northeast when she disappeared on May 22, 2006. She left home to go on a date with a man she'd met at the Flying Star Cafe, where she planned to start working the following week. She never returned and has never been heard from again. Her vehicle was found later abandoned. Peebles grew up in a middle-class Christian home in Fort Worth. Her parents stated she was molested by a distant relative as a toddler and raped by an acquaintance when she was 14. She was initially a good student at Carter Riverside High School and active as a cheerleader, in drama, and on the yearbook staff. But by her sophomore year, she had begun abusing drugs and alcohol and dropped out of her extracurricular activities. When Peebles was 18, her parents put her in the Fort Worth Teen Challenge, a Christian residential drug and alcohol treatment facility for women. She stayed in the program for 21 months, graduated from cosmetology school, and took a job at a beauty salon. She soon relapsed and began using a variety of illegal drugs. She was convicted twice of drug offenses and served 2 short jail sentences. Peebles was fired from her job at the salon after the second arrest, as her drug use had made her an unreliable employee. Her parents wanted her to return to rehab, but she decided to move to Albuquerque instead. She hoped to get a new start in life, make new and better friends, and stop her drug and alcohol abuse. After Peebles disappeared, there were sightings of her reported in the Albuquerque area. The witnesses reported Peebles was calling herself Mia and working as a prostitute for a pimp called AJ, who supplied her with crack cocaine. Police questioned AJ, whose real name is Donald Sears, after he was arrested in Bakersfield, California, and he said that he'd never heard of Peebles. Her father made 11 trips to Albuquerque, as well as Phoenix, Arizona, and Las Vegas to search for her. The last credible sighting was in the fall of 2006, and her father thought she may have been sold to a pimp in another city. Peebles' father was killed in an accident in South Dakota in 2014. In his obituary, Peebles is listed as surviving him. Leah Peebles was 23 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed 105 pounds. She has brown hair and blue eyes. Peebles may dye her hair black, red, or blonde, and enjoys styling it in different cuts and colors. She wears eyeglasses and contact lenses, and has multiple piercings. She has the following tattoos: a scrolled flower design on her upper back in black ink, and a Celtic cross in black ink on her lower back. Her case remains unsolved. Adam Hutchinson was last seen in Sandy, Utah on June 10, 2006, and he has never been heard from again. Few details are available in his case, but authorities state that he's missing under suspicious circumstances and he may have driven his truck into the Jordan River. Adam Hutchinson was 29 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and weighed 170 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes. He has the following tattoos: 2 skulls with clouds and a joker on his chest, a tribal band, an eagle, a sun, a cloud, and a rattlesnake inside a diamond on his left arm, a circle on his left shoulder, an 8-ball, 2 aces, dice, buffalo faces, and a Confederate flag with jail bars on his right arm, a dream catcher, and an eagle on his back. He had a mustache and goatee at the time of his disappearance. His case remains unsolved. Everlise Cabrera was last seen in North Las Vegas, Nevada on June 10, 2006. She and her younger brother were living with foster parents. The Carrascals, V and Manuel, stated they checked on Everlise at 1 o'clock a.m. and she was asleep in her bed. The next time they checked, at 8 a.m., she was gone. They had theorized that she stood on a chair, unlocked the front door of their home, and wandered out. The Carrascals did not report Everlise's disappearance to police until noon, 4 hours after they realized she was missing. The Carrascals stopped cooperating with police case early on in the investigation. Authorities stated that no one outside of the Foster family remembers having seen Everlease since May 15th, which was the day her biological parents last saw her, and almost a month prior to her reported disappearance. Everlease's parents, Marlena Olivias and Ernesto Cabrero, filed a lawsuit against the Carrascos and the Clark County, Nevada Department of Family Services in September of 2006, alleging negligence in supervising and monitoring Everlease while she was in their custody. The Carrascos' adult son, who owned and lived in their home, was never subjected to a criminal background check or license as a foster parent, which is in violation of the agency's standard procedure. The Carrascos pleaded their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and refused to speak when they were questioned about Everlease's disappearance in court. In September 2007, the lawsuit was settled for the maximum payout of the insurance policy provided for foster parents by Clark County. On the day Everlease's parents last saw her, they noticed she had a burn on her hand. They asked for an explanation, but got no answer. Curiously, a previous foster child of the Carrascos sustained second and third degree burns. 8 hours later, he was finally taken to the emergency room and had to spend the night there. He claimed that he had been burned by hot soup. Neither she nor her husband were accused of abusing the child, but he was removed from their home. The Carrascos had demanded the immediate removal of several other children placed in their home, leading to concerns from DFS about their level of commitment to being foster parents. They also failed to complete the required training, but their foster home license was renewed anyway, 2 months prior to Everlease's disappearance. Everlease's parents lived in El Monte, California at the time of their daughter's disappearance. The DFS got involved with the family after Everlease's brother tested positive for drugs at birth. In December 2007, Olivas and Ernesto surrendered their parental rights to Everlease's siblings and allowed them to be adopted by their foster family, with whom they were placed after Everlease went missing. The children's biological parents stated their sons had bonded with the foster family, and they thought the children would be better off there. Everlease's parents have not surrendered their rights to her, however. Everlease remains missing, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance are unclear. Her foster parents are not being called suspects, but remain the focus of the investigation. Everlease Cabrera was 2 years old, 2 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 25 pounds. She had black hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Stephen Michael Mason was last seen on June 20th, 2006. He and his wife were camping in the Olympic National Forest when they got into an argument and his wife left the campsite. Mason went to a friend's house the next day and asked the person to give his vehicle and his wife's purse back to her. The friend drove him back to the campground and left him there. He has never been heard from again. He wasn't reported missing until June 29th. A 2-day search of the forest turned up no sign of him, only a cache of food. Mason is an experienced camper and fisherman who knows the area well and had camped there for extended periods of time before. He was employed as a handyman at the Veterans of Foreign Wars post at the time of his disappearance. His family believes that he is deceased. Stephen Mason was 52 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 152 pounds. He has gray hair and blue eyes. Mason's nickname is Mike, and his case remains unsolved. Gilbert Mark Gilman was last seen in Thurston County, Washington on June 24, 2006. He went for a day hike in Olympic National Park carrying a camera but no backpack. He was supposed to meet a coworker that day but missed the appointment. He's never been heard from. Again, his coworker reported him missing on June 25th. Gilbert's silver 2005 Ford Thunderbird convertible with a Washington license plate was found at Staircase Ranger Station off State Route 101 in the Olympic National Park a few days after his disappearance. Authorities believe that the car had been there since the day he was last seen. An extensive search of the park turned up no indication of his whereabouts, however. Olympic National Park has extremely rugged terrain with dense forests and steep rocky hills. At the time of his disappearance, Gilman was in good health and had good survival skills from his military training. He enjoys outdoor pursuits. Authorities and Gilman's family believe he may still be alive and may have left of his own accord. His bank accounts are still being monitored in accordance with the theory that he went missing intentionally. There is speculation that his disappearance may be somehow related to his work. At the time of his disappearance, Gilman was the deputy director of the Washington State Pension Fund. He formerly worked as a military interrogator and took assignments in counterterrorism and counterintelligence. He had also worked with the United Nations, and he was active in politics. He traveled to many places around the world, including Belgium, the United Kingdom, China, Panama, Israel, Kuwait, Somalia, and Iraq. He moved to Washington from New York shortly before his disappearance. Gilman's mother believes he may have decided to become a spy for the United States government and disappeared as a result. However, there is no evidence to support any theory. Gilbert Gilman was 47 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 160 pounds. He has graying brown hair and brown eyes. Gilman wears eyeglasses. He's fluent in Arabic, Russian, and Chinese, in addition to English. His case remains unsolved. Shirley Teresa Moon Atwood was reported missing on July 15, 2006. She's never been heard from again, and her vehicle was found abandoned after her disappearance. Shirley was estranged from her husband, Shannon Atwood, at the time of her disappearance, and had moved out of their home in Canaan, Maine. Shannon was still living in the home with another woman, Cheryl Murdoch. Murdoch disappeared on July 27, 12 days after Shirley. Her body was found in a wooded area off Scott Road in Canaan on August the 11th. She had been murdered. When authorities went to Shannon's home to question him about Murdoch's case and search his property, he barricaded himself inside, threatened the officers with a bow and arrow, and threatened to blow up the house. They arrested him for criminal terrorizing, reckless conduct, and criminal threatening. He was sentenced to 9 months in jail. In February 2007, shortly before he was scheduled to be released, Shannon was additionally charged with both Murdoch and Shirley's murders. Authorities believe Shirley was murdered sometime between March 15th and July 15th of 2006. Shannon has a criminal history for burglary and theft and was also convicted of aggravated assault on a previous girlfriend. The girlfriend stated he attacked her and threatened to murder her and bury her body in an isolated field. Authorities wanted to try Shannon for both women's murders at the same time, but a judge ruled there had to be 2 separate trials. In November 2007, prosecutors dropped the murder charge against Shannon and Shirley's presumed death. They stated there was insufficient evidence to proceed to trial. That charge, however, could be refiled at a later date. In July of 2008, Shannon was convicted of Murdoch's murder in a bench trial. He was sentenced to 55 years to life in prison. Shirley had been having financial problems at the time of her disappearance. She had inherited a sizable amount of money and property from her grandfather when she was a teenager, including her residence. But in 2006, the government placed a lien on the residence for back taxes. Authorities never believed that she left voluntarily as a result of that lien, however. Foul play is suspected in Shirley's case due to the circumstances involved. Shirley Atwood was 35 years old, 5 foot 2 inches tall, and 105 pounds. She has a tattoo of a heart with leaves on her right shoulder. She has brown hair and green eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Roxanne Elizabeth Paltiff was last seen at approximately 8:30 p.m. on July 7, 2006 at a Budget Inn hotel in the vicinity of Interstate 35 and Runberg in Austin, Texas. She had checked into the hotel with her boyfriend, Lewis Walls. She planned to spend a few days with him, but Walls said they got into an argument and she left angrily, carrying only her identification. Walls stated he tried to follow her, but she told him to leave her alone, so he went back to their room. Approximately 20 minutes later, he went looking for her again, but could not find her. She has never been heard from again. Walls called her mother the following day, and her mother reported her disappearance to police. By the time the police got involved, Walls had checked out of the hotel and gone to his sister's home, taking Paltiff's belongings with him, so any possible evidence in the hotel room was destroyed. Paltiff left behind all of her personal belongings, including her clothing, shoes, purse, wallet, jewelry, and cellular phone, which is uncharacteristic of her. Her boyfriend returned the cellular phone to her family on July 12th. Over 300 calls were placed on it between July 8th and July 12th. Many of them were to Walls' ex-girlfriend in New Mexico. Walls has a criminal record that dates back to 1995. Paltiff's mother didn't approve of Walls, and Walls' mother didn't approve of Paltiff, so the couple would usually go out to be together. Her friends also disliked Walls, who initially lied to Paltiff about his age. He told her he was 19 years old when they started dating, when he was in fact 28. They had been together for 2 years by the time Paltiff vanished, and she often took care of his 2 children. One of Paltiff's friends stated she said Walls had hit her, seriously damaging her nose. He has a history of threatening other girlfriends, and at least 2 of them took out protective orders against him. However, Walls has never been charged in connection with Paltiff's disappearance. Curiously, Paltiff's state of Texas identification card turned up in the wallet of another man, Jeffrey Moore, who was accused of attacking an exotic dancer and trying to rape her. The incident took place on July 13th, 6 days after Paltiff's disappearance, at a Motel 6, not far from the Budget Inn that she disappeared from. Charges against Moore were later dropped for lack of evidence, and although police spoke to him about Paltiff, it isn't clear how he came to possess her identification. Both Moore and Walls are considered persons of interest in Paltiff's case. Roxanne's family describes her as a responsible teenager who was devoted to her 4 younger siblings. She kept in daily contact with her mother, whom she was close to. She had dropped out of McCallum High School in her junior year, enrolled in job training, and was studying for her GED. She had passed all sections of the GED exam, except for mathematics, and had taken a second job. She dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. Her mother believes that foul play was involved in her disappearance. Roxanne Paltiff was 18 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed 115 pounds. She has light brown hair and green eyes. She has multiple piercings. Her nickname is Roxy. Her case remains unsolved.
12 Years with no answers after a mother and daughter were murdered on a local trail.
There's no evidence that I was involved at all.
Now at 7, new answers after the father and husband of the victims took a polygraph test today. And Kara 7's Graham Johnson has talked with David Stodden many times over the years. Graham, this is a case for any of us who were here. We can't forget it.
You covered it. I covered it. It's really just a haunting case.
Yes,
I think
it is.
it is. You know, Mary Cooper and Susanna Stodden, mother and daughter, were murdered as they hiked to Pinnacle Lake. Today, David Stodden took his third polygraph, a new attempt to move this case forward.
Sorry.
After a dozen years, David Stodden's pain is clear as ever.
Still think about him many times every day.
Mary Cooper and Susanna Stodden, his wife and daughter, were shot to death in July 2006 as they hiked to Pinnacle Lake. Mary was a school librarian. Susanna was about to start a teaching internship.
They were really two good people. And they were just on a hike like, you know, tens of thousands of people in the Northwest do every day.
It has long been a chilling whodunit.
It could be just anybody, you know, that walks in off the street. It could be one of our neighbors.
Today, at the request of Snohomish County cold case detectives, David Stodden sat for a polygraph and invited us to meet him when he finished.
They asked him, did you kill your wife and daughter? Were you involved in in the murder of your wife and daughter? Did you help plan the murder of your wife and daughter?
Stodden tells us today's polygraph was his third. The previous results were inconclusive.
I didn't pass it the first 2 times.
But today, the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office confirmed Stodden did pass.
At this time, detectives do not believe he is a suspect in this case because of the polygraph today.
Stodden says he was at first reluctant to do it again.
It's kind of insulting to have someone want you to take a polygraph when it's your own family.
In the end, he agreed because it helps the cold case detectives who took up the murders about a year ago to eliminate him and look for more promising leads. Right now, Stodden tells us there are not many.
They don't have a lot of information.
Stodden theorizes someone mentally ill or on drugs committed the murders.
I think Mary and Susanna were hiking up the trail and someone came after him and saw a couple women and realized he had a gun and decided to take advantage of a couple women, so he made him take half their clothes off and then shot him in the head.
Over the years, David Stodden bought newspaper ads and invited cameras to memorial walks to keep the case in the public eye in hopes of generating tips. He still believes someone out there knows something that might finally bring justice.
Do you fear this case will never be solved?
You know, I never thought that until the last year or so. I mean, I'm still not ready to accept that, but.
Over the years, David Stodden has talked with all the other hikers on the trail that day and has also received anonymous calls from unknown numbers. And today he mentioned one man in particular who he said has called twice but wasn't ready to come forward to police. He now asks that man to call again. It's time. Graham Johnson, Cairo 7 News.
Melanie Renee Metheny was last seen at approximately 8 o'clock p.m. on July 19, 2006, after dropping her 3 children off at the Country Kids Daycare in the vicinity of the 3000 block of East DuPont Avenue in Bell, West Virginia. Metheny planned to go to Garnett Career Center, an adult education program she was enrolled with, to pick up her transcripts so she could register for class at West Virginia State University. The last contact with her was at 9 o'clock a.m. when she called an automobile body shop on her cell phone to verify an upcoming appointment. Some person, possibly Metheny, dialed her voicemail from her cellular phone at 9:30 a.m. She's never been heard from again. She was reported missing that evening after she failed to pick up her children from the daycare as scheduled. On July 23rd, Metheny's gold and tan 1998 Chevrolet minivan with the West Virginia license plate number US8255 was located abandoned in the vicinity of Wyoming Street and Bowring Avenue in Charleston, West Virginia, in an area known for drug activity. The vehicle had been at that location since at least 2 p.m., the day Metheny went missing. Neighbors noticed it there, but did not connect it to her disappearance for several days. The doors were locked, and the van was intact with CDs inside, but it was wiped clean of fingerprints. The only items missing were Metheny's purse and cell phone. No evidence of Metheny's whereabouts were uncovered at the scene, but several items were found on the minivan's front seat, including a business card, a piece of paper with a phone number, and a notation about a house for sale. On the afternoon of the day Metheny disappeared, a witness reported seeing a young woman struggling to get out of a red SUV on the west side of Charleston. The woman was yelling, "What about my babies?" The SUV has never been located, and the woman has never been identified. Investigators believe that she could have been Metheny. Authorities got a new lead in Metheny's case in the fall of 2013 after Cindy Crothers admitted to helping her boyfriend, drug dealer Joey Keith Jeffrey, kidnap and torture another woman, Jeffrey's cousin, in December of 2012. Crothers pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit first-degree robbery with a threat of deadly force and agreed to testify against Jeffrey in exchange for a sentence of 1 to 5 years in prison. She told the court that during the incident, Jeffrey mentioned Metheny and said, "I'm going to put you in the same hole I put her in." Jeffrey is considered a person of interest in Metheny's case and has been questioned about her disappearance, but he hasn't faced any charges related to it. In 2014, he was convicted of second-degree robbery, malicious wounding, and assault. He will not be eligible for parole for 24 years. Metheny is described as a quiet person, using drugs socially, but not known as a heavy user. She was formerly a student at Riverside High School, and she dreamed of becoming a nurse. She was saving up money so she could rent a house. And at the time of her disappearance, Metheny lived part-time on Midland Avenue in Bell and part-time with her boyfriend in Campbell's Creek, West Virginia. Her family suspects foul play was involved in her case, saying it is uncharacteristic of her to abandon her children. Melanie Metheny was 21 years old, 5 feet 3 inches tall, and weighed 100 pounds. She has blonde hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Patrick Ratto has been missing since July 25, 2006. He was last seen by a colleague at 1:30 p.m. when he left his job at Teradici, a tech business in Burnaby, British Columbia, before completing his shift. He has not been seen or heard from since. His vehicle was left parked at the corner of Willingdon and Canada Way, close to where he works. Sometime that day, he withdrew $60 from an ATM. According to his wife, Deborah Dory, he would not have been carrying much money on him, and none of his credit cards have been used since his disappearance. Because of this, his wife believes he must have been planning to make a quick stop somewhere, perhaps taking a trip on a ferry. Ratto's disappearance is described as being totally out of character. According to Dory, "I knew it was bad from the start. I know Patrick. We've been married for 13 years, and I've lived with him for 14. He's never done anything like this before. He left work that day, and that's it. No one's ever seen him again." The search for Patrick Ratto has received assistance from BC Ferries, who conducted searches in Burnaby and Vancouver, and had search dogs scour Burnaby Lake after police received a possible tip that Ratto was seen there on July 26th. According to one report, Dory believes that Ratto is no longer alive, but she said his family and friends need to find out what happened to provide some closure. "It's very hard to move forward," she said. "We need to resolve this so we can move on." Patrick Ratto was 43 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, and 170 pounds. He has brown hair and blue eyes. He had a small goatee at the time of his disappearance, and a black splint on his left forearm due to a motorcycle accident in June in which he badly broke his hand. He was wearing blue jeans, a beige t-shirt, white running shoes, and a black windbreaker with white markings. He was carrying a black backpack. His case remains unsolved. Christina Delaney Branham and her live-in boyfriend, Christopher Mittendorf, disappeared from Hardin County, Tennessee on July 27, 2006. They were living with Christopher's mother, Cheryl Flatt, in Savannah, Tennessee. The pair went out shopping on the day of their disappearance. When Flatt returned to the apartment, the clothes Christina and Christopher had bought on their shopping trip were inside on a bed, but they themselves were gone. They've never been heard from again. The dark green 1994 Geo Prism Christina and Christopher were driving was found unlocked and abandoned 5 days later near a pond in a rural area in Lawrence County in central Tennessee, 60 miles from their home. One of their cellular phones was inside, as well as other personal belongings. A witness reported seeing the couple leave the car there, get into a white car, and drive away. There were many possible sightings of Christina and Christopher in Tennessee and as far away as Oklahoma, but none of these sightings were ever confirmed. Flatt believes that George Edward Bogus may have had knowledge about her son and Christina's disappearances. Bogus, also known as Eddie or Bad Egg, had a criminal record for drug and theft-related charges. He was murdered in March of 2010 at the age of 47, and his wife was charged with first-degree murder in his death. She admitted to shooting him, but claimed self-defense and was acquitted at trial in 2011. Flatt said she found a lockbox in her home that contained items belonging to Bogus. She stated that Christopher and Christina may have robbed Bogus or burglarized burglarized his home prior to their disappearances. Christina had dated Christopher for approximately 6 months before she moved in with him. They disappeared 6 months after that. Christina's mother stated her daughter was happy with her life at the time of her disappearance and planned to graduate high school and join the army. Since Christina's disappearance, her older brother was murdered, shot to death by his employer in 2008. That suspect pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. It is uncharacteristic of Christopher and Christina to leave without warning, and foul play is suspected in their cases. Christina Branham was 17 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed 150 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Christopher Mittendorf was 21 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 120 pounds. He had light brown hair and blue eyes. Their cases remain unsolved. Stephen Howard Bradley left his Las Vegas, Nevada home at 7:30 a.m. on July 31, 2006 for his job at Macintosh Communications. He called the office on the way there to tell them he would be late. Bradley apparently never arrived at work. His wife reported him missing that afternoon when he failed to pick up their 2 daughters from school. The last place Bradley is known to have been was at an ATM in the vicinity of Tropicana and Jones. He withdrew money from the ATM between 12 p.m. and 1 o'clock p.m. Bradley's black 1999 Toyota 4Runner was later located abandoned in Lake Elsinore in California. Foul play is suspected in his disappearance. Stephen Bradley was 37 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed 196 pounds. He had light brown hair and green eyes. He may have been carrying a gray or silver backpack. His case remains unsolved. Teresa Christine Trapp was last seen alive on August 1, 2006 in San Diego, California. She had previously lived in the Los Angeles area of California. Numerous family trips to locate her have been unsuccessful. Few details are available in her case. Teresa Trapp was 29 years old. She's 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed around 115 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Benjamin Curran was last seen in San Diego, California on August 1, 2006. He has never been heard from again, and few details are available in his case. Ben Curran was 48 years old, 6 feet tall, and weighed 225 pounds. He's bald with hazel eyes. He has tattoos on his abdomen, right arm, and left hand. His case remains unsolved. Bruce Parker Pike was last seen at a campground on Indian Creek at Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming on August 2, 2006. He has never been heard from again. After his disappearance, his vehicle was found abandoned in the park. Few details are available in Pike's case, and Texas authorities are assisting with the investigation. Bruce Pike was 47 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, and weighed 185 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes. His case remains unsolved. Tanya Page Robbins was last seen in Nashville, Tennessee on August 20th, 2006. Few details are available in her case. Tanya Robbins was 41 years old, 5 foot 4 inches tall, and weighed 120 pounds. She had blonde hair and hazel eyes. She's missing 3 fingers on her right hand. Her case remains unsolved. Raymond Wallace Perry was last seen by a healthcare worker at his home along Manette Road in Munising Township, Michigan, at approximately 12 o'clock p.m. on August 22, 2006. He has never been heard from again. Tracker dogs traced his scent to the south end of Manette Road, which intersects Algiers County Highway 58, about 8 miles east of Munising. They lost the trail after that. Extensive searches of the area turned up no indication of Perry's whereabouts. Foul play is not suspected in Perry's disappearance. He has 9 children and had lived on Manette Road for 35 years prior to his disappearance. He used to work at the Kimberly-Clark Mill, but had retired by 2006. Perry enjoys hunting, fishing, gardening, and raising farm animals. Raymond Perry was 85 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighed 165 pounds. He has gray hair and brown eyes. His disappearance remains unsolved. Walter F. Smith, Jr. was last seen in his rural mobile home community on Delcar Drive in Edinburgh, Indiana on September 3, 2006. He's never been heard from again. His black 2000 Daewoo Laganza with a temporary license plate was located abandoned approximately 2 months later at an apartment complex on the north side of Franklin, Indiana. There was no sign of Walter at the scene. Walter was in the process of starting a business called Walter's Family Restaurant in downtown Edinburgh at the time of his disappearance. It was scheduled to open in 3 days. All of his personal belongings were left behind. Walter Smith was 42 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, and around 180 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes. His nickname was Tom. His case remains unsolved. Kristen Leonetti's mother, Jean West, dropped her off at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting on McDade Boulevard in Glenolden, Pennsylvania at 6:30 p.m. on September 6, 2006. Her mother stated that she was in good spirits at the time of her disappearance. Leonetti had given birth 2 weeks earlier and was trying to abstain from drugs and alcohol because of the baby. She refused to accept any money from West because she was afraid she'd spend it on alcohol or drugs. She also had stopped taking medication due to her pregnancy. 1 or 2 nights after West last saw her, Leonetti's boyfriend called and said she was with him and was flipping out, screaming and yelling. He said he was going to put her in a cab and send her home. Leonetti's boyfriend usually did this whenever she had a tantrum. She never arrived home, and she's never been heard from again, and her boyfriend didn't call again to ask about her. West reported her missing on October 26th. Leonetti had a troubled past. She was a habitual runaway as a juvenile and dropped out of Academy Park High School in the 10th grade. She gave birth to a son in 2002, and the baby's father was subsequently murdered. She frequented Front Street and York Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to buy drugs. She had been arrested in Philadelphia several times for drug-related offenses, and there was an active warrant out on her for a prostitution charge when she went missing. She had been trying to stay clean, however, and had moved in with an aunt. West discovered Leonetti's boyfriend bought lye, a chainsaw, and blood detection kits in the weeks after Leonetti vanished. West believes her daughter was probably murdered by her boyfriend, but he has never been publicly identified or charged in her case. Investigators have received several leads from the Philadelphia area since Leonetti's disappearance. Kristen Leonetti was 23 years old, 4 feet 11 inches tall, and weighed 100 pounds. She has black hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
Donald Messier was last seen at a party in Waitsville, Vermont at 2:00 a.m. on October 15th of 2006. He left the gathering driving his red 1997 Ford F-150 dual cab pickup truck and has never been heard from again. The vehicle has the Vermont license plate number BGG890, a dual exhaust, a moon visor, a black tonneau cover, and the NASCAR numbers 27, 07, and 08 displayed in the rear window. It has never been located, and since his disappearance, his bank accounts, credit cards, and cellular phone have been inactive. Messier was reported missing on October 18th, 3 days after he was last seen, when he missed 2 days of work at Green Mountain Coffee Roasters without calling in. His family described him as a hard worker and a homebody who rarely traveled anywhere. The only out-of-state trip he had ever taken was in the 5th grade, when his father's work briefly took the family to Florida. Messier was depressed at the time of his disappearance due to a recent divorce and had been hospitalized in August of 2006. His loved ones fear he may have harmed himself. Foul play is not suspected in his case, but it is uncharacteristic of him to leave without warning, and there are concerns for his safety. Donald Messier was 34 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, and weighed around 240 pounds. He has brown hair and hazel brown eyes. He had a mustache and a goatee at the time of his disappearance. His nicknames are Donnie and Bubba. His case remains unsolved.
10 years ago, a 16-year-old girl vanished on Halloween night. She went to a party and she never came home. Her body later found in a field. She had been murdered. Well, tonight her family is keeping a promise they made, never to give up finding her killer. Eyewitness News reporter Chauncey Glover is live in Dickinson tonight with a story that you will only see on 13. Chauncey.
Good evening, Alona. Detectives here at Dickinson Police tell me that this case is still very much open and active. And here, a decade later, investigators are hoping there's someone out there with that pertinent piece of information that will crack this case wide open.
She would always do our nails and brush our hair. So, a lot of the little girly things we used to do.
The Venegas sisters were inseparable until Halloween night 2006.
We originally received a report of Teresa being a missing person.
The youngest of the three, 16-year-old Teresa, didn't come home.
We heard that she walked off with other kids, and we could not find her.
The 9th grader was last seen walking in the Gray K subdivision. Days later, a gruesome discovery, a body found in a field right across from Teresa's school, Dickinson High.
I just remember, I think I dropped the phone and I just started crying.
Family members say Teresa was strangled, raped, and all of her long wavy hair she loved to comb was cut off. 10 years later, Sergeant Tim Cromie, one of the original detectives, is still on the case.
There's been a number of suspects and there's been a number of leads that have been followed up on over the past 10 years. I know there's probably better than 45 people that have been interviewed.
But not enough solid evidence has been found to nail down a suspect. The Venegas sisters have never given up.
It's been hard over the years, but we do have each other.
Forming an even closer bond. Together,
I want my sister's memory to live on.
Still fighting for justice for their little sister.
We just want closure, and we just want whoever did this to be where they need to be, behind bars.
In Dickinson tonight, I'm Chauncey Glover, 13 Eyewitness News.
Maria Rosario Olia was last seen in Colorado Springs, Colorado on November 18, 2006. She was visiting her brother's home when she looked at her cellular phone and said she had to go and would be back. She left at 6:30 p.m. and an incoming call to Alia's phone at 7:14 p.m. lasted 3 minutes. This was the last call she ever took. The following day, Alia didn't show up to pick up her young son from his father. She was reported missing on November 20th. Alia left most of her belongings behind, including her new living room furniture and uncashed child support checks. But her phone and purse disappeared with her and were never found. 6 days after she vanished, her SUV, a blue 1999 Chevrolet Blazer with a Colorado license plate, was found locked and abandoned in the parking lot of Zio's Italian Kitchen, a restaurant in the 6600 block of Corporate Drive near Interstate 25 and Rock Rimmon Boulevard. The restaurant is a long way from her apartment. The brother of one of Alia's friends was employed there. Alia lost her job at Mimi's Cafe off North Powers Boulevard shortly before she disappeared. She was looking for another job, and several potential employers had left messages on her cell phone. Her loved ones say it would be uncharacteristic of her behavior to abandon her child. She shared custody of her son with his father. Alia's family stated she was behaving normally before she vanished and didn't seem to be stressed about anything, but foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. Maria Alia was 29 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 180 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes. She has numerous piercings. Her case remains unsolved.
Nani Ann Dotson resided in San Antonio, Texas in 2006, where she worked as a nurse in the intensive care unit of Wilford Hall Medical Center on the Lackland Air Force Base. She was a first lieutenant in the Air Force and had only 3 months of service left on her commission when she went missing. She was visiting her brother in Denver, Colorado on November 19, 2006, when she disappeared. Dotson was last seen at noon when she left her brother's home in the 9500 block of West Unser Avenue to go to a nearby shopping center. She had a vehicle, but she had decided to walk since the shopping center was only a short distance away. She was never heard from again. Dotson's cellular phone was last used in the area of C-47 and South Kipling Parkway in Denver, and tracker dogs traced her scent to there. The night before she went missing, Dotson went to the Grizzly Rose Country and Western Dance Club, a popular Denver establishment. 2 men at the club were allegedly seen harassing her while she was there, and they wanted to take her to breakfast. She refused to go and asked another patron to help her get away from them. Authorities do not know whether either of the men were involved in her disappearance, but Dotson did make it home safe from the club and did not mention being frightened of anyone. Dotson's ex-boyfriend, Edward Allen Vale, who was the father of her child, hired an attorney and initially refused to cooperate with the investigation. Dotson's brother stated she had a rocky relationship with Edward. He had filed a paternity dispute after Dotson had her child, but DNA tests confirmed he was the baby's father, and he was ordered to pay child support. Edward did finally meet with authorities in December 2006 and provided an alibi. He produced receipts to support his claim that he was home in Texas when Dotson disappeared and had nothing to do with her case. Dotson was due to report back to duty with the Air Force 3 days after her disappearance, but she never did. She left her baby daughter behind, which her loved ones said is uncharacteristic of her. Dotson's parents cared for the girl for over a year after her disappearance and wanted to keep her, but Edward was given custody in January of 2008. Authorities state that Dotson had a stable life in 2006 and would be unlikely to leave of her own accord. She's originally from Colorado and reportedly planned to return there to live after she was released from her Air Force service. She didn't use drugs in 2006 and drank only socially, but she was involved in online dating. There has been no activity on Dotson's cellular phone, bank accounts, or credit cards since she went missing. Little evidence is available in her case. Nani Dotson was 33 years old, 5 foot 3 inches tall, and weighed 115 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
Patricia Joanne Watts was last seen in Grants Pass, Oregon on November 29, 2006. She was leaving the Old Town Mall in the 100 block of Northwest F Street at the time, and she's never been heard from again. Watts was involved with a local drug culture and had a record for fraud, theft, and drug-related offenses. She had a misdemeanor warrant out for her arrest, but authorities don't believe she's running from the law. It's possible her disappearance would be related to gang retaliation. Watts was in a relationship with a gang member at the time she went missing. Her boyfriend was the last person to see her, and he said he didn't know where she was headed when they separated. Patricia Watts was 19 years old, 5 feet tall, and 110 pounds. She has blonde hair and blue eyes. Watts' hair was dyed blonde at the time of her disappearance, but the natural color is brown. She has a tattoo of the words baby boy on the left side of her calf, and she may have been carrying a blue backpack with a picture of the cartoon donkey Eeyore on the flap. Her case remains unsolved. Ernest R. Decker, Jr. was last seen at his property in the 7100 block of Lark Road in a remote area of Brown Township, Ohio, on December 13, 2006. He disappeared with his adult son, David. They were last heard from when Ernest called a friend and said he was headed to physical therapy for his injured rotator cuff. He asked the post office to keep a check for him there. Neither of the men have ever been heard from again. The truck Ernest was driving disappeared with them, as well as David's red 1997 Mercury Tracer. The Tracer had been borrowed from one of Ernest's friends. David's mother and Ernest's parents reported the missing men on December 15th. Authorities went to Ernest's trailer home and found no signs of a break-in and nothing missing. The day after the Deckers were reported missing, an anonymous telephone caller led police to Ernest's truck in a wooded area near the trailer park where he lived. The driver's side door was unlocked. The keys were in the ignition, and various items, including clothing and Ernest's eyeglasses, were located at the scene. Ernest's blood was found on the lens of the eyeglasses. In October of 2008, nearly 2 years after Ernest and David disappeared, investigators announced they had a person of interest in their case. The man was publicly identified as Randy Kadai in January of 2009. He was renting a trailer from Ernest, and shortly before the Deckers' disappearances, paid his rent with a bad check and had an altercation with Ernest as a result. Kadai had an extensive criminal history dating back to his teens. He had been arrested for robbery, kidnapping, assault, carrying a concealed weapon, and multiple charges of domestic violence. In 2008, witnesses came forward and said Kadai drove a small red car, resembling David's borrowed Mercury Tracer, to his sister's house on Robertsville Avenue in Paris Township, Ohio, around the time the Deckers disappeared. He parked the car behind a shed and cut it up with a saw and electric grinder. Most of the parts were taken to a salvage yard, while the engine and the transmission were scrapped. When investigators searched the shed, they found a hood, 2 front fenders, 2 taillights, parts of a headlight assembly, a radiator, and a jack. The vehicle identification number on the fenders matched the missing Mercury Tracer. Authorities went to Kadai's home to interview him and were permitted to search his trailer. They found a crack pipe and marijuana. Kadai was on probation for an unrelated weapons charge at the time, and for possessing the drugs and drug paraphernalia, he was returned to prison to serve a 2-year term. David is a Marine veteran and doesn't drink or smoke. Both he and his father are described as men who could defend themselves in a fight. The Deckers have not answered the cellular phone since they went missing. All calls have gone straight to voicemail. Ernest never picked up that check. He left a few $100s behind in his bank account, and he and David are believed to have not been carrying much money when they went missing. Authorities believe that the Deckers were murdered. Ernest Decker was 52 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 190 pounds. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. He went by the name Bob. David Decker was 31 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 165 pounds. He has blonde hair and blue eyes. He had a beard and mustache at the time of his disappearance. Their disappearances remain unsolved. Nicole Ray Torres was last seen in the 2600 block of North Bryant Street in Denver, Colorado on December 14, 2006. She was en route to visit her 4-year-old son, who was staying with his father. She never arrived and has never been heard from again. On June 1st, 2007, nearly 6 months after her disappearance, Torres's white 1992 Jeep Cherokee with a Colorado license plate number 591-JTP was found abandoned in the parking lot of an apartment complex in the 2200 block of North Dayton Street. Torres left behind 3 children, and her family doesn't believe she would have abandoned them. She was working at Sally Beauty Supply at the time of her disappearance and living with her mother near Sloan's Lake. Nicole Torres was 27 years old, 5 foot 4 inches tall, and weighed 110 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Shannon Lynn Fisher, was last seen at approximately 4:00 p.m. on December 18, 2006, at her boyfriend's residence in the vicinity of the 200 block of East Blackhawk Avenue in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. Her boyfriend, Michael John Burrows, stated they had an argument, and he told her he wanted to end the relationship and demanded that she leave his apartment. She has never been heard from again. At the time of her disappearance, she did not have a job, a vehicle, a driver's license, or a permanent address. She relied on friends and family for housing and transportation and moved frequently, keeping her belongings in a tote bag and a small duffel bag. Fisher's parents notified authorities of her disappearance on December 28th. They became concerned because she had not contacted them over the Christmas holidays. Her disappearance is described as completely out of character, and her parents do not believe that she would have left of her own accord. They described her as a naive, childlike, immature, and easily suggestible young woman. Fisher had 2 young children who were in foster care at the time of her disappearance. She went missing once before, in 2004, when she abruptly moved to Iowa to be with a man who fathered her first child. However, in that instance, she told friends of her travel plans, and she called her mother a short time after arriving in Iowa. Fisher has not had any contact with her loved ones since 2006. A major break in the case came in October 2010, when Burrows went to police and confessed to Fisher's murder. Prior to the confession, authorities stated they believed foul play was involved in Fisher's disappearance. They didn't consider anyone she knew a suspect. Burrows stated he had strangled Fisher to death after she stole a bag of drugs from him. He kept her body in a closet in his apartment for several days, then dumped it in a garbage bin behind the building. Burrows was charged with first-degree homicide. In January 2011, he was declared incompetent to stand trial due to a delusional disorder. He was held in a state psychiatric hospital until his competency was restored. In January 2012, he pleaded no contest to the charges against him. He was sentenced to 31 years in prison. Foul play is suspected in Fisher's disappearance due to the circumstances involved. Shannon Fisher was 23 years old, 5 feet 3 inches tall, and weighed 140 pounds. Fisher told her mother she was pregnant in late November 2006, but this was never confirmed. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
This is Case Unsolved, and I'm Carlos Virgen. Here's a preview of the Erica Sirioni story.
New Year's Eve, 2006. Erica gave her 2 boys a kiss. They were 4 and 8 at the time. She threw on a black jacket with a fur hood. She walked out of the house. Other than the friends she was with that night, no one ever saw her again. Alive, at least.
No. Yes, she had issues. Yes, we know all of that. But she was still a person. She was still a mother, a daughter.
And she wasn't like that all her life.
You
That's
know.
just it, you know.
We know the negative, but there were positives too, you know.
It's just like any story like this. It's, you have to really make yourself, relive those moments and remember the good and remember the person rather than thinking about how things were for the last 4 to 6 years or longer.
Erica was an at-home type of person. She kept her circle of friends small, and she liked it that way. Erica was having some trouble fitting in. She would show up late or cut out early to smoke cigarettes with some friends.
She was always such a guarded person. She didn't trust a lot of people.
At 20, she was charged with 6th-degree larceny and illegal use of a credit card. The cops again. Driving with a suspended license, evading responsibility, traveling too fast, 23, and following too close. Possession of marijuana with intent to sell, possession of a controlled substance, possession of drug paraphernalia, misuse of marker plates, and driving an unregistered vehicle. At 24.
I see how damn skinny she was. I'm not stupid. When somebody becomes that skinny and that frail, you could tell who does what.
Something had changed Erica Sirioni, transformed her from a homebody to a drug user, a young woman regularly getting into trouble with the law. On March 18th, 2012, some kids playing in the woods in Montville stumbled upon Erica's remains. Her case remains unsolved.
We took a week off, but we'll be back next week with the first episode of the Erica Sirioni story. In the meantime, you can catch up with any episodes you've missed. Also, remember to recommend Case Unsolved to friends and family. And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or whatever app you use, as that helps people discover our podcast. And don't forget to join the Case Unsolved Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/case-unsolved.
And that's not an ad. That's a case. And you should check out their podcast.
In Florida, I actually had him in Florida in 2006. And I had him again in that area in 2009, but briefly. And I don't know if he killed anyone. I know he wasn't the Boca killer because that's what the FBI wanted him to be. Or not the FBI, but Jeff Bell thought he might be the Boca Raton serial killer. He's not that
Right.
guy.
No, yeah.
And I looked at that case, and who I did have him down for in Florida is Jennifer Kesse. I think it's him in the video.
Man, I have to agree with you on that.
I think there's no way it's not him in the video. Just given, because the guy's pants are bloused, and he knows exactly where to step to not really be seen. I don't think he knew he was being watched from the overhead camera, but he cuts up against the gate in a way that even if there was a camera up there working, it's not catching him very well. And I do think that it briefly caught this killer taking Jennifer Kesse's car back.
Yeah, I don't know for sure that it's him, but I will agree that when I watched the surveillance of the person that they felt like had taken her car to that apartment complex, it looks an awful lot like him. And it's weird because I don't even know what it is about it that makes me think it's him. But I think that, I don't know what it is. Maybe I just have it in my mind that I want it to be him. I don't know why that I really thought, I was like, that there's no question in my mind that is him walking there.
I scrolled past it looking at something else, and it didn't have anything to do with this case at that time. And you and I had not gotten into the deepest discussions. I mean, it's literally years ago. And when I looked at it, someone had colorized it and tried to do something to it. I thought when I looked at it, oh, that's Israel Keys. And
maybe
I have no
the bridge of his nose and the back of his head or something. I don't know what it is.
I couldn't tell you why I did it. All I can tell you is for sure that when I looked at it, that's who I thought of. And so when we came back to it, I was like, oh, I wonder what that was. And I didn't know, I didn't put all of that together because it was a colorized picture. And I found out, when I went back re-hunting it, there was something, sometimes when I'm in a hotel room, I'll run live PD or investigation discovery, and I'll just let it go, while I work and do other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that at some point in time, I heard the words, but there was a picture of the person of interest. And I was like, what? It was pulled from a grainy surveillance camera. And I didn't even know what case was on the television, but I looked up at it. And whoever was talking in that video said Jennifer Kesse. And I was like, wait a second, that's all together? So I watched the video. And the first video, I was like, oh, I've seen this before. Because it's a video of a parking lot, and it's terrible. But then they were and then there was another image, and they called it something. I don't know what they called it, but they said stop motion or something that made the camera take pictures every 3 seconds or something weird. And whatever they said about the frame rate or whatever, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then they showed the other picture, but it was black and white. And I looked at it, and I was like, wait a second. So.
Well, I think that's interesting that you say that because let's see, she's 2006, right?
Yeah.
I watched something just recently, just like you were saying, it was just on, and I don't think it was a what did you call it? A photogrammetry. I don't know that it was a photogrammetry expert talking it was somebody in law enforcement at least talking about this one case, and they made an observation about the people in the video, and these were victims before they became victims, and he kept saying that, like, they were in this, like, stupefied, like, zombie sort of, like, pattern of walking, like, from their house out to the car, like, while they were getting their stuff ready to go. And so it made me look, because he kept saying it, and I was like, that's really weird. Well, like, they must have had it set on, like, one frame every minute or something like that, because it was a very choppy surveillance, right? And when I was looking at it, I thought, they interpreted that to be zombie-like, but really what's happening is it's skipping, all these frames in between.
Right.
And so it's really easy. It's just like on the Jennifer Kessie surveillance, like it's not a smooth.
It's not a moving video. It's not 24 or 30 frames.
Right. It's just and so whoever, it's unfortunate that it is the way that it is, because if that gate hadn't been there, you could see them,
Yeah. Well, with her, but I don't, I had a lot of trouble there. I discovered this weird fact about Florida. They do not have as many of the locations as other, like if you go to Vermont or New Hampshire or California or Washington or Oregon, I can walk you around and show you where they're going to be, or I can pull up a map and I can give you general areas. And there are some that are sort of, I would say they're off the books, on more rural piece of property, but for the most part, they're documented. In Florida, they're not as documented, but there's a few down there. So that was weird.
You know why, right?
I assume it's for flooding purposes. I assume it's
because the ground is sand there.
And that would have the same effect.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking, the further north you've got this red clay mud type, which will, hold up.
And
but in Florida, everything's sand, so it literally won't work.
And they're also weird in Alaska, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but they're there.
I don't know.
Well, this all sort of goes toward there's a case there that I was hunting for a while. And that's a July 2006 case. And I was just trying to see if I could glean anything from some of the tidbits you picked up. This is not necessarily, you wrote this case off. You said no. But it's technically an unsolved case. And I do want to ask you about it because I want to know what your no is for. And this is Granite Falls. So it's Mount Baker, Snoqualmie National Forest. It's Susanna Stodden and her mother, Mary Cooper.
Oh, it was because they were shot in pairs.
So you don't think that 2006?
Not in a million years he would not have done that. I don't think he would have done that.
Okay, that's enough.
Do you? I mean, think about our theories on, our even known disposal methods. Okay, frozen lake.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And they're ultimately ending up in the landfill. I don't see him, because if I remember that case correctly, they were found shot to death and they were posed on a trailhead or something to that effect. Is that the right case?
Yeah. That's the one. I never have this, a lot of things I look at and I just go, oh, no. And that one, I didn't follow it with the idea of, so the bodies have been found. You know what I mean? The bodies are found. It was in the middle of nowhere, for sure. And But it
was on a trail, right?
There's this spot where there's a plaque, and it's not exactly on the trail. It's off of the Pinnacle Lake Trail, so it's close. But they weren't, they got so into like proving the father did it in that case that when I go hunting, I can tell you this, that the trail they were on is very secluded. It's a remote area. It becomes a remote area. And at one point, the FBI stated unequivocally they had ruled this guy out. But then all that disappeared. And I don't know why. And if you go looking for it, like if you go looking for like the newspaper articles and stuff related to it, you can find them like in the archives. But if you go looking for them online, they're not there anymore. As far as if you go looking for the Seattle Times article, it's been removed, not like updated, not like changed a few words, but those articles from like 2016, 2017, where they were saying that he definitely wasn't involved, but they're all gone. And I wondered if they had found something there or found out that he was close to there or something. And I was wondering if it was something we could recreate if that was the case. What I do know for sure is on the internal timeline. So they have like the timeline they gave out, and then they have a timeline that we got with the FOIA. And then they have this internal timeline that came because of the FOIA for American Predator. And that's what they call the dark spot timeline. He has a dark spot right there. And like he's not anywhere that anyone can find him. And like it had originally said they had been posed, but when I go back and reread that, it's not that they were posed. What it is that they were like pulled off the trail, like tucked away. They're not just laying there openly. Does that make sense? So here's what I wondered. Like, is that a case where had something else to do? Had something like he would like another step? Because the locations there are very far away from where they were. There's locations like in that area, and I've looked at him at Granite Falls because I have a shit ton of like cases there of people that vanished in vehicles that like are there. And at one point in time, when he was in the military, there was a stack of cases there. Like you can like literally open it, and there's like 4 cases over a period of 18 months in that area that don't repeat. They don't duplicate. Sort of like Vermont. Like if you go through Vermont, missing persons cases, there's just not so many. Connecticut, not so many. New Hampshire, not so many. Like there's just, during the time he was active, suddenly there's a bunch. Well, he's got a dark spot during that time. When I go back and look at like some of the cases I think of with him, I do like him for couples and pairs. I just don't know why they would have been like left out like that if it were to be him. And I was wondering, like, is that a case that we just cross off because the bodies are found, or like do we hunt any further?
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you because a lot of my research depends on taking whatever he has said in his interrogations that were steered by people who weren't me because I wasn't there, like, and I have to take it for what it's worth. And so obviously a person who is a serial killer would have no problem lying about anything. Ethically or morally, they wouldn't have an issue with that. And so I realize at times it's really ridiculous for me to like hold him to what he said, in so much like the only person he ever shot was Bill Courier, and only the one body was found. Like that whole thing, he could have been lying about all that stuff. But once I go there, even with, other rules in place where you say, oh, well, he is only thinking back to this point in time or whatever, trying to sort of wiggle and make things work. If I don't take what he's saying for what it's worth and either believe it or not believe it, then there's no reason for me to be researching this stuff. Does that make sense?
Is it like an endless possibilities thing?
Yeah, well, sort of, but also, like, if I am incorrect on taking what he says for what it's worth, in my opinion, then it's pointless. Like, there's no reason.
I can see you having that perspective, and it is a valid perspective, so I don't want to seem like I'm invalidating it. But the truth is, this case is so big, and it spans so many jurisdictions, and, like, even, you know, the FBI, because I was talking to someone recently about another case that it's got a killer like this that I really was thinking about, like, covering. I was thinking about going back and doing the research, and I realized I had already started because I had ruled out a bunch of cases related to this killer that seemed to be the other killer. And the homicide detective called me back on that case. And he's like, I'm retiring, and, like, I'll talk about it. And then another person from another one of those connected cases called me, and I asked him, I was like, look, this is what I'm doing. He's like, oh, I've heard what you're doing. And I was like, am I wrong in, like, thinking, you know, all of this could have been solved by someone else? And he said, well, he's like, ending up in the hands of the FBI like that, you know, not doing what you're doing. You're doing kind of shoe leather and internet research, and you're doing it with, like, a large amount of hindsight. But ultimately, they're not homicide investigators. They can profile someone who's still killing in order for local investigators to catch him. But they don't go in and catch killers the way that you see it in the movies. And he said, what you guys are tackling is really interesting to me. And he agreed to, like, work with us on some other stuff if we want to. But what he said was, keeping it in perspective is one of the most important things that you have to do with homicide investigations. And he said, not the exact same thing you do, but he said that you could get into ad infinitum, which is your endless possibilities, with missing persons cases. I just ran by him, like, am I wrong to be looking at, like, couples? Because Mary Cooper and Susanna Stodden aren't a couple, but they're a pair. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And they were together, and they weren't, like, when I looked back through it, I won't say that they were posed, because that's not what it looked like to me. It looked almost like they were to be picked up later, which made me think of the Couriers. But the Couriers were a little more, they were in bags. According to him, they were in bags. We don't know that for sure. But I had looked at, you know, as we go along, like the Alan Cutshaw shootings on the beach. And there was another one I didn't end up, like, bringing back up, but it comes up in Mary and Susanna because I ended up having to go back into research, and I just wanted to see if I could find the killer for this other case, which was Brandon Rumball. That's an Arizona case, and I don't necessarily like this killer for it, but at this point, I have been trying to be sort of the foil to you, because you do really well at, like, interpreting him. And you pointed out something where you said, like, I'm interpreting this from being able to listen to 2012 version of his brain. And I totally understand why you don't do endless possibilities. And I know this is dark, like, mind imploding work if you let it be, and you do good not letting that happen. I, on the other hand, I like to look at things that might be connected and do them, not necessarily endless possibilities, but I like to run them a bunch of different ways and see what happens. And I just thought, like, what if that was misinterpreted? And what he really had done was, like, he was like, oh, God, I'm not going to be back until midnight tonight. And they're kind of, like, rigor's going to set in because I've, you know, touched 100 bodies at this point or whatever. And I don't want them to not fit into whatever, the trunk of this white car that I'm going to be driving, or the back, you know, so I'm going to fold them over. And they're not posed. They're just, you know, ready to pick up or ready to drag or whatever he might do. And so I think that they have to be mentioned mainly because of the dark spot. And those dark spots, do you know what I'm talking about? Like, do you know what they were trying to do?
I was going to say, I don't think, well, yeah, they were talking when because he talked about how he took his battery out of his phone or whatever, and there was some way that they could tell that.
It's basically, it's not a dark spot. It's like an absence of use.
Right.
So,
but it would mean that the phone was off because it wasn't pinging or anything.
Right. So the phone was off. There was no access to voicemail or text messaging or whatever he had at that time. And basically the phone has a period of time where it's essentially untrackable. It's weird because they were applying rules from a little too far in the future, and it ends up looking like that serial case where everybody's like complaining about like the cell towers meaning something or not meaning something that really can't be interpreted.
Yeah, and I don't understand how I've recently seen where, you know, tracking on cell phones has gotten really good apparently, and it's like they're applying it retroactively, and I don't think it works that way.
No, well, the tracking today is done like it's almost like a marketing gimmick. I mean, like think about like Find My iPhone or whatever.
Yeah, it's GPS. I mean.
And as we were wrapping up the 2006 cases, we've got to look at a case from earlier than 2006, because that's where the next discovery came from. While we were researching the 2006 cases, I wanted to go back and look at a 2004 case that originally I'd glossed over, but because of some of the information from the 2006 cases, I thought it might be worth taking a second look at it. We came across some things in the previous years that we need to tell you about. And 3 of them are really big things. So here we go.
They were so young and just starting out in life.
Less than 2 miles off the busy I-17 highway is Bumblebee Road. And for 16 years, detectives have been trying to figure out what happened to a young couple who was camping here just overnight for their anniversary. It was their first and their last.
She always had a smile on her face. As a matter of fact, she sang at my wedding.
She was 19 years old. Lisa Guerrieri's life was picture perfect. She sang in church, worked at SRP, and was in love with a 20-year-old ASU student, Brandon Rumbaugh. The couple lived in Scottsdale.
I always thought of Lisa as my own.
Her uncle, Mike Guerrieri, helped raise her after Lisa's dad died of cancer.
He asked you to watch over Lisa?
Yeah.
It was October of 2003. Lisa and Brandon wanted to go camping to celebrate 1 year of dating. The plan? Head up to Bumblebee Road Friday night with the white truck and be back Saturday morning. Lisa knew Uncle Mike would worry about her safety, so she asked her mom not to tell him. Lisa never came home.
So you didn't know she had gone up there?
No. And it has crushed me ever since.
As day turned to night, Lisa and Brandon planned on stargazing, then going to sleep. But instead, they were shot dead. And of all the evidence collected at the scene was a disposable camera. And now, for the very first time, we're seeing the last pictures that were taken on it.
The camera looked like it had been thrown away from the truck, and it was found by some rocks.
Do you think the person who killed them tried to throw the camera away to destroy evidence?
Well, it's a good possibility.
Frank Barbaro is a lieutenant with the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. He was at the crime scene in 2003 and is still working the case. Even broken, he says detectives were able to develop several pictures on that disposable camera. They found a solo picture of each of them in the truck, the last pictures on the roll. But before that, there are blurry pictures of a CFL light in some kind of building. Detectives still don't know where those were taken or where the couple was before they parked for the night. But Lisa and Brandon had another camera with them, a video camera.
We never located that thing. So we found the camera case, but we never found a video camera.
And you know what kind of camera it was?
Yeah, it was a VHS camera, and we know everything about it, even the serial number.
So you think the person who killed them took that video camera with them?
Absolutely.
And a rare weapon was used for the murders, a .25 caliber handgun. That gun was nowhere to be found, and still hasn't been. Detectives needed to know why this young couple was targeted.
Normally, people are killed by somebody they know.
And that's where they started. When the two went missing, a group of guys went searching and found the truck with the dead bodies inside, a group Brandon and Lisa knew.
If they're not involved, they are involved as far as they know something.
Mike went to question one of them soon after the murders, the man he believes might have had a reason to kill.
What would have been the motive?
He wanted Lisa. He wanted Lisa bad.
To be with her?
To be with her. I was on my way. I was in my truck. I was headed to the freeway. I got a phone call saying that he wasn't there. The house, the place was wiped out, clean.
And that's when he says YCSO botched the investigation with that man.
The family believes there was a person of interest who was talked to and was only cleared by a polygraph test, and then that person skipped town. Is that true?
He moved to Washington, I think, and they went and did a polygraph and cleared him, but you know, I wouldn't clear somebody just based on a polygraph.
But was he?
Well, he was cleared by them. Nobody's cleared by us right now.
Cleared by them, you mean Washington authorities?
No, by the detectives that were working on the case.
From YCSO?
From YCSO.
So do you think you guys should retest him and re-question him and re-evaluate everything about him?
Everything's on the table right now.
But there's something that's been nagging at the sheriff's department for years.
I like to read, I like to research. I think the more time I spend with it, the more I'm not willing to give up.
Deborah West is a cold case volunteer with the department, focusing on this case to help Lieutenant Barbaro. She doesn't believe Lisa and Brandon knew their killers at all.
I'm leaning more toward a random. Whether it's someone, the purpose was to break into the truck, steal the truck, whatever, and we're surprised by the people in the back.
And for the first time, we're learning there's a reason to believe that may have been the case. YCSO has been investigating a theory behind the scenes, one that's hard to ignore. Just 6 months after Lisa and Brandon were killed, two men from Yuma were camping in Crown King, just minutes away from Bumblebee Road. They were shot dead too, and their truck was stolen. That suspect committed suicide after being found in Colorado.
6 months later, we have a similar type of crime where two people are shot for their vehicle to be stolen.
Odd?
It's very unusual. It never happens here. We don't have any physical proof of it yet, but it really surprises me that these would be completely unrelated.
West says the focus now is DNA testing items from the crime scene they haven't before.
Brandon's pants, the jeans that were there. It's very possible that the perpetrator looked through the pants.
And Lieutenant Barbaro will be questioning people again, even if they've been cleared.
It always comes back to somebody.
These are the last pictures of the couple alive. Their final night together, the last piece of evidence authorities have. Do you think this will be solved?
Yes.
And Lisa's family can only hope he's right. Because for 16 years, her silenced voice has made everything feel very wrong.
So, yeah, it's been a pretty horrible thing. My father had a saying, it is what it is. But I don't think that goes for murder.
We actually already talked about this area, but we talked about it with the case of Lisa Snellgrove, and I started to wonder about the other couple they mentioned in this video. So I went back and dug up a little bit of information on the other couple, or rather, the other pair.
From the Yuma, Arizona News. On May 5th, 2004, the bodies of Omer Lee Casey of Somerton and William Ray Middahl of Yuma were found Monday in a National Forest campground about 30 miles southeast of Prescott by U.S. Forest Service workers. On Tuesday, the suspect in the double murders, identified as 21-year-old Rusty Rankin of Phoenix, Arizona, apparently killed himself at a Colorado hotel after police spent 3 hours trying to coax him out of his room, said Lieutenant Steve Francis of the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, said detectives knew of no apparent motive for the killings. Casey and Middahl, longtime friends, had gone to the Crown King area to go camping. The longtime friends often went camping and spent hours in target shooting competition. Omar Lee Casey was an owner of the Casey & Sons Harvesting Company. Midal retired from Arizona Public Service for more than 30 years. The double murder was the second in recent months in the area. In October, 2 other campers were found murdered in a campground not far from the site of Monday's grisly discovery. That double murder remains unsolved. Arizona police have not called Rankin a suspect in that case. Brandon Rumbaugh, 20, and his girlfriend Lisa Guerreri, 19, were killed by multiple gunshot wounds to the head. The couple from Scottsdale was parked 5 miles south of a campground near Prescott. Olga Valerevna Ponarevna was last seen when she left her residence in the 11,400 block of Southeast Fuller Road in Milwaukee, Oregon, at 4:00 p.m. on April 29, 2004. She was walking towards the Ross Center at Southeast Causey and Southeast 82nd Avenue. She's never been heard from again. She left behind all her belongings, including her money and identification. Olga may be in Colorado or elsewhere in Oregon. Olga Ponomareva was 21 years old, 5 feet 1 inches tall, and 115 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
Here's how all those cases shake out for me. You got Lisa Snowbro. I don't know. You pick Olga. We can use Olga as an example. I don't know that it's her, but you can find these bodies. Here's the thing with Bumblebee. Bumblebee's a ghost town. Like that area that they camp in out there. That's a ghost town. Literally a ghost town. Like not like it's, you know, it's an abandoned area. Lots of abandoned stuff around there. So here's my theory. So the killer is doing away with one person. He's got one location there because that's all there was. And those kids at the Bumblebee, the kids that were camping, Brandon and Lisa, they see something. So, you know, that's a weird handgun. It's a 25 caliber ACP. It's a little pistol. And it's rare, but it's the perfect handgun to like pull out and have on somebody, which is what he describes when he's taking people. He, you know, has these little guns. That case is, to me, kind of him killing the witnesses. He's executing them real fast. So there's that killing. Then there's the other one where they've got this guy Rusty Rankin supposedly killing Omar Casey and William Midal. What I think happened there is they rode up on the scene. And or hiked up on the scene, whatever how you want to like put it. But I think Rusty Rankin was the third witness. I think there were 3 witnesses to that one, and maybe he was like, "Oh my God, they're gonna pop me for that," and that's why the standoff happened. I don't know that for sure. I'm speculating. I'm guessing how it could have happened. But there's a location right there, right where the bodies were found. Like it's like within eyeshot. So what I think is we now know. The question had been, what happens if you didn't take them? Because some of the things that we've laid out here, that's in the argument is that, well, he didn't take them. That's not him. So that's why he didn't take them. I can't explain it with Albert and Joan out in Reno. I can't explain it in the Montreux case. So that may not be him, maybe him. Maybe there's something there we're not looking at, because I did dig around there, and I had one case for him. I had one case for him that day. But it's in Vegas and they're up in Reno. I don't know if it all works together. But that made me think I need to like create a checklist and like just find crimes that fit my checklist, right? So that would be weird ammunition or that 22 caliber or 22 caliber subsonic ammunition that didn't fit with other elements. Like, you know, are the phone lines cut? Are, you know, is their entire family killed? Is there a couple? Is there a child abduction? If we find one with a child abduction, that would be sort of the ideal, like a remote area, phone lines cut, home invasion using 22 caliber or 22 caliber subsonic ammunition or other weird ammunition where like the whole family was killed and a child was taken. That would sort of be like the holy grail of, okay, that's this killer right here. We got it. If we find that. And I don't know what that's like, but you know, the different things, the different elements are going to be pretty rare. Maybe we'll even get a sketch of them.
And I went looking for the perfect case, or the perfect case for possibly this killer. I looked all around the country. I looked at all of the years that fit into his timeline. What I was looking for was a couple or an entire family that had been killed, with absolutely no motive, a complete whodunit. I was looking for 22 caliber bullets, a child abduction, phone lines that were cut, a home invasion, and crossing state lines to dispose of a body. I was starting to think that maybe all the bodies had been found. So I even thought, what if it was just partial remains? And then I hoped that maybe the local police and the FBI had held back some evidence in that case. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to find a case that matches these criteria. And then I remembered that the killer said he always stopped at homes that were for sale. So armed with all of this criteria, I went looking, and I found one. So at the tail of this show, I'm going to play a long clip about a 2002 case that I think matches this killer perfectly. Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LABROTTIECREATIONS.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more. You can come over to Patreon.com and check out what we've got going on there if you'd like to donate to fund future True Crime XS road trip investigations and FOIA requests. The most important thing that you can do for us, though, is share us with your friends. Give us a rating on your favorite podcast app and share us so all of your friends can hear us. We'll see you next week.
This is True Crime XS.
I think about this case every day. And I probably will until it's solved.
If you don't know what you're looking for, it's easy to miss. The overgrown lot off US 220 set back from a busy highway. Aside from the mailbox and driveway, there's nothing left of the Short family home in Oak Level, Virginia. But ask Lieutenant Curtis Spence how it looked 17 years ago, and he'll paint a picture of the life Michael, Mary, and Jennifer Short shared.
The house was up for sale, and it looked like a showplace. I mean, you could have put it in a magazine. There was nothing out of place inside the house.
Nothing out of place, but on August 15th, a horrific crime scene inside. Michael and Mary both found shot and killed that morning inside their home.
Single gunshot went to the head. Sometimes he would actually lay down on a couch that was in the garage area, and that's when we found him. Mary was in the bed in their bedroom.
Their 9-year-old daughter, Jennifer, was missing. And while the priority was the massive search to find the little girl, investigators were combing through every room in the Shorts' home for clues in what was now a double murder case.
I stayed in that house for over 2 weeks myself, just collecting evidence. I mean, we fingerprinted everything you could think of, including the walls.
Jennifer's mattress was moved just 2 inches out of place, her pillow on the floor, and someone had cut the phone line to the Short home.
Someone would have to have brought a tool with them to actually cut the phone line, and they would have had to have the knowledge of which lines to cut coming in. All the phone lines were not cut, just the specific phone line that needed to be cut.
Search warrants show investigators pulled .22 caliber shell casings, a rifle and shotgun out of the home, along with $600 and a blank check. But Lieutenant Spence says they collected far more.
We've collected over 1,000 pieces of evidence, and normally the average case, you'd collect maybe 50 or 60. But you always had that piece of evidence that would give you the information that you needed. This particular case, we just didn't have it.
He says they can't say specifically what they found inside. It's all stored here in the Henry County Sheriff's Office and with the FBI.
It was a couple months before they would even allow us in the house.
Linda Sink was Michael Short's daughter-in-law when the murders happened and remembers vividly trying to clean the home after investigators left.
They say when a person dies, they don't bleed that much. they die instantly. They told us that Mary had died instantly, but yet when you pulled back the cover, the bed was full of blood. Jennifer's room was a mess because where they had put fingerprint and stuff everywhere. I guess going in the house, it gave you the creeps too, just to know what happened in there.
As family members said goodbye to Mike and Mary, the search for Jennifer intensified.
Please release her so she can come home. We all miss her and her beyond words.
Hours and days passed. No breaks in the case, no clues, no sign of Jennifer.
On behalf of the family, we're pleading for whomever has Jennifer to please return her, release her to a secure location.
That was one of the worst feelings of my life that I've had at this point. Too many questions and no answers.
Yeah, the big why. Why would someone do something like that?
For 6 weeks, loved ones remember tireless searches for 9-year-old Jennifer Short.
She was a fun, loving child. She was a smart child, but she loved her parents to death, both. Not one more than the other, but both equally.
Carolyn Short learned someone killed her brother Michael and his wife Mary by watching the news. One of Michael's employees found both murdered, execution style, with a single gunshot wound to the head in their Oak Level home. Their daughter missing.
That took a big chunk out of my life that I'll never get back.
One of the last places Jennifer was seen was at the Circle C, just a few hundred yards from the home. Surveillance video shows her coming in to buy something from the clerk.
She was just happy she could be. I talked to her about going to school, and she said, oh, yeah, I'm ready to go. And she was dressed real cute and just happy as she could be, like always.
Search teams and volunteers sent out for miles around the Shorts' home as Henry County investigators brought in criminal profilers from the FBI.
This was the only case like this in the United States at the time, so it was hard to profile. The profile that we got was just very, very general, and they couldn't pin it down anymore because this was the only case like it at the time.
It was during those 6 weeks that family members and friends said goodbye to Michael and Mary. Deputies hoped they'd find clues to the killer and kidnapper in an unusual place. Michael and Mary's funeral. Lieutenant Curtis Spence said they filmed the service hoping to catch anything that could lead them to Jennifer.
Well, we had no idea who actually committed this horrendous act, and we did not know whether they may even show up at the funeral, kind of as a trophy, or the possibility that if it was someone that was close to the family, their actions may give away what they had done.
This is like something, there's like a movie on TV about, like, so for it to happen in real life and for me as a person to be somewhat involved in the person's life, like, it's just kind of surreal.
Caitlin Lane was close with Jennifer in school. As teachers at Figsboro Elementary set up the rising fourth grader's desk in class, they remained hopeful she would be there on the first day.
We'll begin the day by letting them cut the yellow ribbons and wear their yellow ribbons to remember Jennifer. And we'll answer any questions that they may have.
Caitlin doesn't remember much from the weeks leading up to back to school, but recalls her mom telling her something had happened to her friend.
Because they found her parents and Jennifer was just missing at first. So I think that's the conversation we had in the bedroom, and she didn't really like give me details about anything. She was just like, they found Jennifer's parents this morning, and Jennifer wasn't at the house. So the biggest explanation, but more so to like protect me, I think.
As weeks went on, family members called for Jennifer's abductor to let the little girl go.
We miss you and we love you very much. Please don't give up, because we will never give up till we find you.
6 weeks later, just over 30 miles away, deputies found Jennifer.
At the time, we didn't know who it was, but we knew that little girl was missing from Virginia. But never in a day would we dream that she would turn up here. I can remember it like it was yesterday.
17 years later, Lisa Albert Vaughn vividly remembers the days leading up to September 25th. Her 20-year-old son was mowing her father's yard off Grogan Road in Stoneville when he found a child's tennis shoe.
He didn't really think anything about it because he always found items that the dogs had drug up. And a few days later, he had threw away what he assumed to be a wig.
Just days before, Lisa was washing her car when she made a discovery of her own. A set of teeth near the end of the driveway.
My dad was like, oh, it's probably just animals because there's deer and rabbits and squirrels and all kind of animals here. And Dad was like, don't worry about it.
A rural area beside a pond and creek. It wasn't until one of the family dogs was playing with what appeared to be a turtle shell that Lisa's father realized something wasn't right. He called over a friend in law enforcement to take a look.
He said, I'm afraid that's not a turtle shell, it's a skull. And then we realized we wasn't sure about that wig.
The remains found scattered across the property were later identified as 9-year-old Jennifer Short.
It just really rips you apart. It's like, how could she end up here, right here on our property? And from then on, she became part of our family.
She remembers watching investigators drain the pond on her father's land and search for evidence near the property.
Then as they walked over the property over behind us, they would put down flags. And there was flags. You couldn't count how many flags was out there. And every flag stood for a piece of her body or a piece of evidence that was laying out there.
Over in this area right here that's kind of grown up a little bit, the creek area was being searched. We had cadaver dogs and all kinds of support out here. We had officers and deputies and police officers all over Henry County, Rockingham County, investigators just basically coming through the area to see if there's any evidentiary remains that they could go off of.
Lisa's father remained involved with the case for years, watching for suspicious drivers and inviting deputies onto his property, even into his home as needed.
Come and use my driveway, do whatever you have to, use my yard, use my house, find out what happened to this little girl. Because she did. She became part of us. She became part of our family.
Like so many others, he wanted the closure that never came.
He had hoped before he passed away that they would find out who done this. We always discussed it. We always went over scenarios, and especially the one, how did this little girl get from Virginia to here? Why did she end up here in this area? And it was always on his heart.
With children of her own and a granddaughter the same age Jennifer was when she disappeared, Lisa says she only wishes her family could have found the 9-year-old sooner.
Because we all wanted to know what happened to this little girl and who could do such a horrific thing to her.
Time does not make a case cold. The lack of evidence or the lack of information coming in is what makes the case cold.
That lack of evidence has always eaten away at Linda Sink and Carolyn Short, a constant frustration as they think back to August 15th, 2002.
The way it was handled. The way it was handled. Too many people in the house, no evidence. And I find that hard to believe.
Carolyn remembers arriving to her brother's Oak Level home and seeing dozens of people in the home and on the lawn.
I hope that did not hurt anything with the case.
Lieutenant Curtis Spence, now retired from the Henry County Sheriff's Office, explained that prosecutors from 2 counties were brought in to examine the crime scene.
That was something that was decided back in 2002. I hope that it was something that may help the case by taking in just, the prosecutors from Franklin County and from Henry County. And I know for a fact that having the crime scene technicians in, that really helped us.
Teams of volunteers searched frantically for 9-year-old Jennifer over a 6-week period.
You just have to believe that you're going to be the one that finds something.
Tents were set up to accommodate people coming from North and South Carolina to help, while Rockingham County's mounted volunteers searched by horseback. Then, a shocking turn of events. Investigators exhumed Michael Short's body to take hair samples. Keep in mind, he'd only been buried 13 days. Law enforcement decided it had to be done to perform a paternity test.
When we found Jennifer, I know there was some question in the past of whether or not Mike was actually her father. Well, we know for a fact that he was her father.
The searches turned up nothing. Jennifer's remains were found and leads began slowing. That is, until investigators announced they had what they called a material witness named Garrison Bowman. The 60-year-old from Madison left the country for Canada the day after Michael and Mary were killed and Jennifer was abducted. He had leased a mobile home about a mile away from the spot where Jennifer's remains were found in Stoneville.
I must order your deportation from Canada, therefore.
Canadian authorities deported Bowman back to the U.S., not because he was a material witness in a murder case, but because he had failed to disclose DWI charges.
The decision is just, I'm guilty due to my own damn stupidness.
Talked to people in the past that thought we had already made an arrest on this case because of the Bowman gentleman that he's since deceased. A lot of folks thought we had arrested him. That is not true. He was never convicted.
Bowman was kept in custody for weeks, even appearing before a grand jury in Roanoke. Michael's sister says even then, she never saw Bowman as the killer.
I just don't see him having anything to do with it, never have thought that. And I always said that if he didn't do it, please God forgive everybody that has accused him of it. But I never accused him because I didn't think that.
They've replayed the gruesome details of Jennifer's murder time and time again, hoping it brings them closer to answers.
They never did find her whole body. Never did. They drained the pond, everything, they never found her whole body. Out of all that. So when we had her funeral, it wasn't her whole body.
Do you wish you didn't know all of that?
No, I'm glad I know what I know. Wish I knew more.
Carolyn is clearly frustrated. To make matters worse in her eyes, the FBI waited 7 years to release some of the only clues in the case. In 2009, they put out this sketch of a truck witnesses say they saw near the Shorts Oak Level home, and a drawing of a man said to be in his 40s. Family members say the lingering question has always been the motive, why someone would do this, and if Michael and Mary weren't being targeted, was Jennifer?
Was it a sexual predator that she was the target of the crime? We do believe, by the way, the house, what did happen around the home with the cutting of the phone lines and some of the things, I do think this was a person that may have been watching for some time, and it is possible they may have been watching and getting patterns of behavior.
We never seen nothing. I never seen anything that was taken in for evidence. When they returned that, we didn't get any of that. We didn't see nothing.
Carolyn Short says family members have always pushed for more information, wanting to know what hard evidence investigators have and why her brother, his wife, and their daughter were targeted. We took their concerns to the FBI. The special agent in charge of the case asked that we hide his identity.
Why is there so much that you can't share? What about that is so helpful as far as the investigative side?
So the case is still active. If I could, I would like to work nothing but this case. You know, we just can't comment on what we've done in the investigation because it could affect it.
At least 5 special agents have taken over the case since the abduction and murders happened nearly 2 decades ago.
You have younger investigators that are motivated and they give it attention and it provides a little fresh perspective, like newer ideas, technologies change. Investigators change.
But even as investigators change, they haven't announced any leads since these sketches were released in 2009. A flatbed truck said to be near the home in the early hours the day of the murder, and a man with a weathered complexion believed to be inside.
Those sketches were released so many years after. Was there a reason that they weren't brought up sooner?
There's a specific reason why that we released it at that point in time, and I can't go into detail why those sketches were released at that point in time.
Year after year, the sheriff's office and FBI call for anyone with information to come forward. But when I ask specifically what they need to know...
Anybody who knew them in the community and knew of their comings and goings. In other words, their travelings around the area, specifically during that time frame.
The only change in approach came in 2015. The Henry County Sheriff's Office started asking Jennifer's classmates and friends to come forward.
There's a picture of her smiling with her parents, and that's what I see when I think of her.
I found Caitlin Lane by flipping through the last yearbook Jennifer was in at Figsboro Elementary School. She says they were close, but she's never remembered anything unusual leading up to the summer of 2002. Deputies wanted to know if anybody had been watching Jennifer, wondering if she may have been the target of the crime, something Caitlin says she can't imagine.
She was a really sweet girl. So I just, like, you know, anytime I think about Jennifer, it's just like a sweet, happy, you know, kind person.
Raising a daughter of her own now.
She's all over the place, into everything she can get into.
Caitlin says what happened to Jennifer has stayed with her.
I've just become a little more cautious of, like, my surroundings and stuff, a little more wary. I would be lucky for Kinley to grow up and to raise her the way Jennifer's parents raised her, and like for her to be the person that she was.
And because the sheriff's office, state police, and the FBI have never revealed a motive for the crime or released any new leads, friends and family are left in the dark.
I can't imagine why something like that would happen to people like that.
It touches my heart to know that there's people out there that still thinks about it, still keeps it going, and they don't give up.
It's easy to see the impact this case has had on the Martinsville community, and the yellow ribbons tied to a row of motorcycles and the stuffed animals placed on the Jennifer Short Memorial Bridge.
To me, this is remembering my brother and his wife and my niece.
But to know how the murders have scarred members of the Short family, they'll tell you even on a day meant for remembrance, they're wondering if the killer is among the crowd.
Every time I come to these rides, I think about that. That person could be out there.
Scared. You're always looking over your shoulder everywhere you go.
For the only family members who regularly attend the rides, what happened August 15th, 2002 has changed the structure of Carolyn and Linda's family. Linda says at the time, she and her then husband, Jennifer's oldest brother, were in the process of adopting a little girl of their own.
And then when this happened and they found that Jennifer had died, then Kenny decided that he couldn't bear the thought of having a child at that time, and something like that could have happened to that child. So we ended up not adopting her.
Carolyn says those kinds of memories resurface every year.
It is tough, very tough. But when August comes, it's even tougher.
She's never been able to grieve the loss of her brother, his wife, and her niece.
Don't get me wrong, I do cry, but not like I would like to. I would like to cry until I couldn't cry no more.
Carolyn says that won't happen until she has answers and the killer is brought to justice.
And I might not even live to see that person, but I'm still praying that I will. And if I don't, it just wasn't meant to be.
After years of making the drive from Martinsville to the place Jennifer's remains were found, Carolyn wonders what Jennifer would be like today had she been found alive.
Wonder if she would be married, she would be in college, if she would have a good job, would she have kids? You know, I think about it because I see the other two girls, what they have made their life out to be, and they were all the same age that was born the same year.
And standing on the bridge named in her honor, those who knew and loved the 9-year-old pray one day they'll know who killed Jennifer.
Well, I ruled this case out. I ruled it out. I actually liked someone else for it, and then I've been to that crime scene. Well, I've been to both the crime scene and the disposal spot. Actually, I've been to the Arizona places. I've been to all of these at this point. And this one, I ruled it out for a number of reasons, mainly because I couldn't figure out why the little girl was stumped. And looking back on it now, I had this map. I remember looking at the map, and I was like, it's right here. And I was like, why does this all look like this? Why would he throw her off of, why would he put her there? And then I figured it out. And when I figured it out, it was because, in 2002, if you look at this, the maps changed. So what I'm trying to do is get a map for Meg, because I want her to see that this was something different, like this area. So now this is a state park, but that state park didn't come to be till 2002. And what they did first is cleared all this. When they cleared all of this, came a park, they started building, so it's right in the middle of this case. And then in 2003, it officially became a state park. So that's the date that's on it. But if he was looking at a map, 2001, there's a location right here. It's a couple of miles from where her body was found. So this is another one of those instances where a map up through any map he had in 2002 would have said it's there. It's right there. But the reality is once you get there, it's not there. So we had to do something different with the body.
You got something behind your eyes, the way you're talking, it's a cheap disguise. We were made to chase the light, but you got set